Anna ran down to Hagrid's hut, cloak billowing behind her. She got so worried, she turned into her fox form to go faster. When she finally reached the hut, she changed back. Anna dashed through the doors. "Harry, I'm here, what's wrong?" She took in the scene. Ron looked ill with his head in a bucket. Harry was talking to Hagrid, and Hermione was looking at Ron worriedly. Hermione smiled when her idol entered the room. She'll know what to do. "Professor Anna, that idiot Malfoy made fun of me, and when Ron tried to cast a spell on him, it backfired." Anna sighed. "I told you to get a new wand, Ron. I'll see what I can do. May I ask what Draco said?" Ron took his head of the bucket and glared. He called Hermione a mudblood, the twat. Harry, who still had no idea what a mudblood was, looked at Anna for her reaction. He was surprised to see how angry she was. "I hate that. I used to have the same problem, Hermione. In fact, Lucius Malfoy was the one who did it the most." Hermione's eyes widened. "You're a muggle-born. What did you do?" Anna grinned. "I did everything I could to prove I was just as good as any pureblood, if not better. That didn't work, though." Hermione looked down. "So they never stopped?" Anna shook her head. "Oh no, they did for the most part. But I soon found that I needed to ask for help. One day, a group of the slimiest of Slytherins happened to say it in front of my friends, and they went ballistic. That was one of the first times I realized how close we really were. I don't think I really saw them angry until then." Harry grinned excitedly, hoping to hear something about his parents. "What did they do?" Anna turned to him with a smile. "James Potter, the rich, popular, pure-blooded prankster, ran up and punched Lucius Malfoy right in the nose and yelled, 'Don't ever insult my sister.' And when my other friends found out what happened, they threatened any bully who even dared even look at me funny. Merlin, Harry, they were my family. We did anything for each other. I realized in those days that that was the best method of scaring off bullies, proving to them that you are not alone. Showing that unlike them, you have real friends who actually care about you, and not about what family you come from or how rich you are. You three need to stick together. Trust me. If you do, there won't be a single obstacle you can't overcome." The trio smiled at each other, but turned serious when Anna returned her attention to Ron as he heaved in the wooden bucket once more. "All right, let's see. Ow, that's a nasty spell to have bounced back. I can borrow a few things from Professor Snape and you should be good." She turned to Hermione, because she knew the mudblood thing must still bother her. "Draco said the same thing to me at Diagon Alley, remember? If reason won't get to him, Hermione, it might do him so good if he got a bloody noise the next time he mutters those words. He obviously doesn't know how powerful that word is. Stand together and don't let anybody push you down. You are the most brilliant and hard-working witch I've met since my sister. The only reason Draco is so keen on bullying you three is because he knows you are the only three that are capable of taking him down. You guys are destined for greatness, believe it or not, so don't let Draco's words burn into you. They are just words after all. Who cares what he thinks? He can't go 5 minutes without crying to Daddy." She glanced at Ron's paled, slightly green face. "I better go get what I need for your potion, Ron." With that, she strode away and Hagrid chuckled as she left. "You've got to love Anna, don't you? She's such a sweet girl, but the minute you mess with that fox's cubs, you better run or those fiery locks just might turn to actual flames." His chuckles turned into hearty laughter, and Hermione smiled. "She's brilliant. I wish she was my aunt." Harry put a hand on her shoulder, while Hagrid simply ruffled her hair in a show of affection. "She likes you, Hermione. I don't doubt that you remind Anna of either her sister or herself. You may be as smart as a Ravenclaw or as kind and hard-working as a Hufflepuff, but there's no doubt that true Gryffindor fire burns in your heart. You have the same spark that I saw years ago in a young Anna Evans." Hermione smiled, and although Hagrid didn't know it, she knew she would always treasure his words. Anna found herself in Snape's office in no time. "Severus, I need— Oh, thank Merlin!" She was about to ask why the Slytherin was so relieved when she heard a familiar, irritating voice. "There you are, Anna. I didn't see you at breakfast this morning. I was afraid I might have to use my impressive wizarding expertise to save you. It's a good thing you're okay, or someone would have been seriously injured from my powers." Anna crossed her arms and muttered under her breath, "Yeah, you." Severus coughed. "Is there anything you needed, Anna?" She nodded. "I need some ingredients for a potion. It seems Ronald Weasley has gotten a nasty spell bounced back onto him. I told him to get a new wand." Severus nodded. Take what you need. Lockhart smiled charmingly. Are you sure you wouldn't rather have my assistance, Anne? She cut him off with a cheeky smile. Nope, I'm good. See ya, Sev. The men hadn't even realized that she had been picking up ingredients from the shelves throughout the entire conversation. She waved and dashed out of the room, careful not to drop anything. When were those Weasleys going to prank that idiot already? She supposed it was better for it not to be rushed, though. The best tricks always took the longest to prepare. She stumbled through the door as she tried to carry all of the ingredients at once. I knew I should have taken a basket. Hagrid, you wouldn't mind fetching me a cauldron, would you? Fill it with hot water, if you will. Hagrid brought over a small, steaming cauldron, and the children, apart from Ron, gathered around to watch the professor. She smiled at the two, deciding this would be a great opportunity for them to improve their potion skills. How about you two help me? You don't have to do anything big, don't worry. They agreed and began making the potion, occasionally giving orders or asking for things. Harry, pass me the bowl with the blue powder in it. It should be a little sparkly, and it smells like vanilla with a dash of iron. Harry scanned the ingredients, sniffed the substance cautiously, before passing it to Anna. This? She grinned. That's it. Now, Hermione, since you're done cutting the Ethiopian water turnip, why don't you start mixing the yellow liquid in that square maroon bottle with that silver paste on your left? Give to me when it turns reddish-orange. Hermione smiled, excited about all of the mysterious ingredients they were using, but she was curious. Professor, why are we doing this and not the healers or Professor Snape? Anna laughed a little and nudged the younger witch. Can't let them have all the fun, can we? Oh, are you done already? Splendid. Look at that nice shade of scarlet. Matches my hair. Everyone laughed, and before they knew it, the brew was completed. Anna held up a small glass of the potion, sniffing it to make sure it was exactly the way she wanted it, before passing it Ron. Bottoms up, Ronald. This'll make you right as rain in the time it takes to tie your shoes. The ginger smiled weakly and chugged the liquid, expecting the worst. To his surprise, it wasn't that bad. It tasted like lime juice and Parmesan cheese. Not bad considering how terrible most potions are. He wiped the remaining liquid from his top lip and waited for a second, trying to see if he felt any different. After about 10 seconds, he grabbed his stomach, and for a second he was sure he was going to vomit, but the feeling quickly passed and he beamed. It worked! Thanks, Professor! She waved him off and put a hand on Hermione and Harry's shoulders. Thank your friends. They were a real help. She gathered all of the remaining ingredients. Now I've got to go back to Sev and return all these. Hagrid held up a finger. Hold on. I think I've got a nice little basket right... Aha! Here it is. This should do just nicely. Anna shook her head. That's all right, Hagrid. Hagrid smiled earnestly. Take it. Besides, it'll give me a chance of seeing you again. You're always a joy to have. Anna felt touched. All right, Hagrid. See you soon. Maybe you can show me how to cook that vegetable soup you cooked last time I was here? Hagrid nodded, his amber eyes glowing warmly. Aye, and you can show me how to cook those brownies you make. I still can't get them right. She giggled. Deal. Hermione, Ron, Harry are coming with me, or are you staying with Hagrid? Harry shrugged. I think we'll stay with Hagrid until lunch. That's not too long. She gathered all of the remaining ingredients. Now I've got to go back to Sev and return all these. Hagrid held up a finger. Hold on, I think I've got a nice little basket, right? Aha, here it is. This should do just nicely. Anna shook her head. That's all right, Hagrid. Hagrid smiled earnestly. Take it. Besides, it'll give me a chance of seeing you again. You're always a joy to have. Anna felt touched. All right, Hagrid. See you soon. Maybe you can show me how to cook that vegetable soup you cooked last time I was here? Hagrid nodded, his amber eyes glowing warmly. Aye, and you can show me how to cook those brownies you make. I still can't get them right. She giggled. Deal. Hermione, Ron, Harry, are you coming with me or are you staying with Hagrid? Harry shrugged. I think we'll stay with Hagrid until lunch. That's not too long. Anna walked into Severus's classroom. Snape looked up. Did you already finish? She nodded. Harry and Hermione helped me. Sorry about leaving you with Gilderoy. He mock glared. You should be. I had to threaten his life to get him to leave. She waved him off. Oh, please, Severus. You and I both know you enjoyed threatening the moron. Besides, I have a feeling the he will suddenly run into a string of bad luck fairly soon." The potions master raised a suspicious eyebrow, and the edges of his lips turned upward. "A feeling, eh?" She feigned innocence. "Yep." He sighed in exasperation. "What on earth are you planning, Anna? Another one of your schemes?" She gasped and out her hand over her heart melodramatically. "Why, Severus? I resent the accusation. I am a teacher now. Nay, I'm an adult. You really think I'd be so incredibly childish as to conspire against a fellow co-worker just because he's a little too moronic and pretentious for his own good?" The Slytherin looked her up and replied in a dry tone, "Yes." She chuckled. "You know me too well, Severus." He nodded, frighteningly so. "I should probably be worried. Being around you and your odd mind would make anyone mad." His playful tone was clear, and she played along. "Yeah, well, I'm surprised I haven't become a right old grump with you around Mr. Cranky Pants." She strolled to the door. "Toodles!" She skipped away until she came across the twins, talking in hushed tones. "It's the perfect plan, and—" Anna put on her best McGonagall imitation. "Perfect plan for what, Mr. Weasley? I do hope you aren't planning to do anything foolish." They spun around and sighed in relief when they saw the laughing professor. "Anna, great news! The plan is ready and we're going to do it at lunchtime. It's going to be hilarious." She grinned. "Really? It's all ready?" They nodded and her smile got even bigger. "Well then, let the games begin." Everything was in place for the plan. Anna and the twins separated 10 minutes before lunch, so it wouldn't seem suspicious. The professor was trying to contain all her excitement. She decided to wander the halls and came across a familiar face. "Sir Nicholas?" The Gryffindor ghost chuckled and floated over to greet her. "Little Anna, is that you? I haven't seen you in quite a while. I must say I missed that mischievous gleam in your eye. Are you up to your old tricks?" She grinned. "You bet, but shh, it's a secret." The polite ghost chuckled and kissed her hand. "Don't worry, my dear. I will not tell a soul." He winked and eyes lit up. "Oh, before I forget, you are officially invited to my Death Day party." She curtsied, only mocking him a little bit as she imitated a posh accent. "I would be honored to attend, my lord." He grinned. "I am glad you have not lost your spark, my lady. It's been a pleasure, but I must be off." It was officially noon, and everyone was walking to lunch. Anna saw Colin Creevey and smirked, thinking, "Please let that boy take a picture of this." She rushed to the teacher's table and sat down, not even noticing a certain potions master sitting beside her with a raised eyebrow. "You're up to something." It wasn't a question. She smiled innocently. "Why ever do you say that? You have that evil glint in your eye. I see that look in my nightmares." The witch grinned and punched his shoulder. "Oh, Sev, you dream about me." The Slytherin shook his head and rolled his eyes as the food appeared and everyone began to eat. 10 minutes later, Anna saw Lockhart begin to fidget, and she fought to keep a straight face as she listened to her dark-haired friend complain about incompetent adolescents. The faux wizard started to look worried. Then blue smoke wafted from him, and Professor McGonagall asked if he was okay. He chuckled. Yes, perfectly fine." He covered his mouth as a strange bird-like sound escaped from his lips. He now had the attention of the entire school, and, for once, the pompous professor did not appreciate a publicity as his fingertips turned a dark blue. Now the students and staff were all exchanging worried glances. In truth, Anna had also felt a flash of fear. Had the twins gone too far? But a quick peek at the redheads assured her that they weren't doing anything painful or irreversible. In seconds, Gilderoy's body was completely blue, and Anna couldn't help but snicker when a beak began to form. It was now clear what was happening. A final puff of thick blue smoke with green glitter surrounded the man, and for a moment you couldn't see him at all. But the smoke quickly cleared, and in Lockhart's place, there was a confused and slightly disoriented peacock. The bird sighed in relief and said, "Well, thank goodness that's over. Do I still look okay?" The bird had spoken with Gilderoy Lockhart's voice. Finally, Anna couldn't take it anymore. She burst into laughter, breaking the stunned silence, and the entire great hall followed the suit. "What? What's so funny?" This, of course, only brought forth more laughter. Even Minnie and Snape chuckled at least a little. Minnie recovered first and elbowed the amused headmaster, reminding him he had to put a stop to the madness. He sighed and cleared his throat. "All right, that's quite enough." Everyone immediately quieted to snickers and hushed conversations. Dumbledore smiled a bit, obviously entertained by the amusing prank. Now, Minerva, if you would escort the professor to the infirmary so he can be sorted out and we can set to work on reversing this little prank. There were several moans and groans of disappointment from several students. The headmaster raised a hand to silence them. Quiet, settle down, let me finish. As I was saying, and while Professor Lockhart is occupied, Professor Evans will take over his position until he is available. After all, she is more than qualified for the job. All the snickers and groans immediately stopped, and no one moved a muscle. Then, simultaneously, the entire great hall, well, except the Slytherins, roared in applause. Fred and George stood up and whooped. Harry and his friends followed their example, standing up and clapping for Anna in a slightly more well-mannered fashion. Albus didn't even bother telling them to be quiet. He just sat back down and everyone finished their meals. Lunch ended, and Harry, along with several of his Gryffindor friends, ran up and chatted excitedly with Anna. Most were just happy to finally learn from a real professor. Anna excused herself to her room. She had a lesson to plan. With Harry and the gang in the courtyard, Harry was grinning from ear to ear. He knew it wouldn't be permanent, but he really couldn't help but feel elated at the thought of finally being able to learn from his aunt. She was just such a unprofessional, working class, no good, troublesome freak with no sense of what's good and proper. There it was. Draco Malfoy's posh, arrogant voice was loud and clear. Harry's mood quickly soured. He was becoming more and more irritated as the pureblood continued to rant at an obnoxiously loud volume. More than qualified. I'd rather be taught by the peacock than that little dirty-blooded. Harry was fuming, and Hermione and Ron couldn't stop him as he marched straight over to tell him off. "Take it back, Malfoy!" Draco shoved him. "Make me Potter!" The blonde smirked as Harry glowered. "You know, Potter, I pity you. No family that cares about you for 11 years, and someone finally comes along and it's that freakish ginger woman. You know, I saw her reading a Muggle book the other day. Can you believe that?" Hermione and Ron held back their furious friend when he lunged forward. Hermione pushed herself in front of him. "What do you have against Anna, Draco? Why are you so rude to her?" Draco glared. "It's the principal. My father says—" Ron scoffed. "Your father is probably jealous, Malfoy, and so are you, admit it." Draco scowled. "Why would I be jealous, Weasley? I have both of my parents." Harry's hands were fists. That was it. He was going to punch Draco Malfoy right in the nose. "Mr. Malfoy, my office, now! You too, Mr. Potter!" The two adolescents spun around to be met with the terrifying sight of Minerva McGonagall coming back from the infirmary. She didn't even glance at them as she walked right past them. Draco looked at Harry, confused. The young wizards just shrugged and followed the professor, glaring daggers at each other the entire time. It was a strange sight for Minerva, seeing the two boys side by side. It was painfully obvious how opposite they were to each other. She sighed and began her lecture. "This behavior is inexcusable. I expect a full apology." The boys glanced at each other. Draco glared and gestured to the head of the Gryffindor house. "She means you, Potter. Apologize." Minerva narrowed her eyes. "I'm afraid you're mistaken, Mr. Malfoy. I meant for you to apologize to Professor Evans." Harry smirked a bit, but did not comment. He knew that would only bring trouble to him. Draco opened his mouth to protest, but McGonagall wasn't having it. "Detention, Mr. Malfoy, for 2 weeks. In my office. Don't be late." Draco sputtered. 2 weeks? She raised an eyebrow. "Shall we make it 3? He shook his head. "No, ma'am." "Good. Now leave, and don't forget that apology. If you don't, you'll get an extra week of detention." He slammed the door, and Professor McGonagall shook her head in exasperation. "That boy is a menace. Sit down, Mr. Potter." He honestly hadn't even realized he was still standing there. Malfoy was the one in trouble? That hardly ever happened. Nonetheless, he quickly sat across from her as she graded papers. They sat in silence for a minute or so, the only noise being the scratching of her quill against the old, thick paper. She finally set her quill down onto the piece of parchment and smiled. It wasn't a very large smile, nor was it long-lasting, but nevertheless, it was a smile. It looked as if she was proud to Harry, but it was something more to that. The professor took a moment to look him over. "Ever since the day I met you, I thought you were just like Lily Evans. Of course, there were hints of your father here and there. That's where you got your knack for trouble. But from what I just witnessed, I could have sworn James Potter himself was in front of me, not his son. Anna has had her fair share of bullies in her life. She doesn't let them bother her anymore, but when she was younger, she was picked on mercilessly, and very few knew it. Until one day, Lucius Malfoy pushed her down and called her, ahem, the M word, if you will, right in front of your father. Harry was on the edge of his seat. He swallowed and looked up at her, eager to hear more. What did he do, Professor? He knew the story because of Anna, but it was interesting hearing it from another's point of view. Another smile played on the lips of the normally very strict professor. Well, he didn't just stand there, that's for sure. He broke Mr. Malfoy's nose. James's parents weren't upset either. They knew your aunt very well by this time. The point is, after that, Anna stopped keeping her head down. She was always one to speak her mind, but she was never the kind of person to want to be a burden on others. Your father, along with his friends, showed your aunt that she was not a burden, that she was worth the trouble. He made her stronger, and now after all the years I believe he still is, through you. Harry's eyes widened. Me? She nodded. She has had a rough time with her blood family ever since. 3rd year, I think. Her sister, Petunia, was particularly jealous of Anna and despised her silly way of doing things. She caused a lot of tension in her household. Anna got sick of it, so she left. But you are the only flesh and blood family that has ever accepted her since Lily's demise. Harry nodded, and she is the same for me. Minerva sighed. Harry, just be careful. Your aunt would be heartbroken if something happened to you. He bit his lip. You two seem to be close. Minerva nodded curtly. I taught her. She was one of my best students. We bonded, you could say. To me, Anna is like a daughter of sorts. Whenever she needed advice, she would come to my office and we'd have tea. He smiled a little and stood up to leave. Thank you, Professor. He walked to the door, but she stopped him. Mr. Potter, you and Mr. Weasley have that detention tonight. Mr. Weasley will be polishing the silver in the trophy room with Mr. Filch without magic. Professor Lockhart requested you to assist him with answering his fan mail, but considering his condition, you will be working under his substitute. I expect great things from you. Do not disappoint me. With that, she pushed up her glasses and returned her attention to the papers on her desk. Harry nodded and left, going over her words in his head. Harry didn't know exactly what she meant by that, but he had a feeling she wasn't talking about detention. Anna smiled at her nephew as he knocked on the door of the classroom. Harry, you're here, just in time. Come in, you'll be helping me prepare my lesson for tomorrow. He smiled. What do you need? Well, I need you to help me put together these catapults and slingshots first. He let out a surprised laugh. Catapults? Slingshots? Really? She winked. I'm not going to get another lesson to myself in a while. I'm going big. Besides, Albus said I couldn't teach you how to go against dragons. He plopped onto the floor and set them up with her. Then, they need to be tested out. Anna smirked and aimed one at the portrait of Lockhart on the wall and put some jelly beans in the end. She looked at Harry. Fire in the hole! He set off the catapult, and the beans hit the portrait right in the center, and they high-fived each other. He laughed. What now? She looked around. No clue. After several minutes of the thought, she smirked at Harry. I bet you can't get a bean in my mouth. He grinned. You're on! No cheating! He loaded the catapult once, twice, 3 times, until he made it in of the 4th try. He grinned. What now? She shrugged. I don't know, but I have to keep you here for a certain amount of time. Just help me organize the bookshelf. He nodded and began taking the books out and arranging them in alphabetical order when he heard an eerie voice in his head. Come to me, let me rip you, let me tear you, let me kill you. He looked around with fear in his eyes. After a minute, he realized someone was shaking him. Harry James Potter, stop it, you're starting to scare me. He snapped his head to her. What? She smiled in relief, but it faded into worry. What happened? Don't say nothing, you looked like you saw a ghost. He stayed quiet, returning to the books when he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked up and met Anna's beautiful green eyes. Harry, tell me, please. He sighed. You promise? You won't think I'm nuts? She nodded. Cross my heart. I heard a voice. It sounded monstrous, and it was asking for someone to come and die, basically. She gasped softly. Could it be a Hogwarts ghost? He shook his head. I doubt it. She sighed. Well, there's nothing we can do. I'll walk you to your house when we leave. I think we can go after we finish with the books." He nodded and picked up a book went to put it on the shelf, but Anna quickly stopped them. "Oh, put that one over here, it goes with the set." He turned the book over so he could see the front cover. It was labeled Dragons and Magical Beings of Australia. It was bound in deep purple leather and floral designs decorated the cover. He flipped through the pages and found several colorful illustrations of various beasts. Some of the images even moved, and a smile came upon his face when a unicorn galloped across a page. He looked up at his aunt. "Are these Professor Lockhart's?" She raised an eyebrow. "Do you really think Gilderoy would own a book he wasn't in?" "No, they're mine. All of these books are. That one was the first one I got of that series, though. It was when I went to Australia to help a woman called Sarah. She's a dragon trainer there, and she wanted me to come and see all of the new, fantastic creatures they had recently shipped from Romania. She works at a place that keeps endangered magical creatures in a safe environment where they won't be discovered by bystanders. Oh, it was magnificent, Harry. I wish I could have brought you. I got to see so many different dragons from all over the world. A Hungarian horntail, which is one of the fiercer dragons. A Chinese fireball, a Ukrainian ironbelly, so many different kinds. And it wasn't just dragons. I saw a chimera and billywigs, which are actually native to Australia, and I even got to witness a unicorn birth." Harry had a dreamy smile on his face as he listened to his aunt ramble on and on about the magical beings she saw. It certainly got his mind off the voice he heard. He continued putting more books up until he realized the only one left was the one in her hand. He looked at it curiously. "How did you get that book, Auntie?" She grinned. "Sarah gave it to me. I still write to her occasionally, not often, but I still like to think of her as a pen pal of sorts. I met her when I studied magical creatures when I came out of school. I didn't want to just be Aura. I wanted to have several skills instead of just one, so I went into all sorts of things like potions and defense against the dark arts and healing. Her last name is Smith now. She married a man named John. He's a doctor of sorts." She glanced at her watch. "All right, I think we should get you to your dorm. You need your sleep for tomorrow." The next day, Anna woke up earlier than usual the next morning. She yawned and sat up when she heard a tap-tap-tap sound from her window. She squinted her eyes and realized it was Remus's owl, Arthur. Arthur was a small, wet owl with brown and white feathers and big, adorable yellow eyes. Anna had gotten Remus the owl for his birthday. Wet owls are fairly tiny, and Anna couldn't help but buy the silly little bird. Arthur was as curious and clumsy as he was cute, which was part of the reason she thought it was perfect for Remus. The only difference is Arthur was a bit more energetic, like a child, which made sense because he was a bit young. She quickly got up, putting on her slipper, and scampered to the window to let the poor bird in. She opened the latch and held out her finger. Arthur hopped on and she took him to her bed, setting him on the bedside table. She scratched his head and cooed, "Hey, Artie. Did you miss me?" She scratched his head and Arthur let out a small hoot. Avalon perked up from her perch. She and Arthur got on fairly well. Remus had actually named Arthur after King Arthur from the legends, like she had named her owl Avalon. Anna realized Arthur had a letter tied to his leg and carefully untied it. Seeing as his duty was done, he flew back out the window. Anna quickly unrolled the piece of parchment, excited to hear from Remus. "My dearest Anna, how are you? I hope you are all right. Have the Slytherns been giving you problems about your blood status? Hagrid owled me yesterday. He said something about Gilderoy Lockhart turning into a peacock during lunch. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Everything is fine, don't worry. Arthur is good company. I think all of your fussing over my health has rubbed off on him. How is Harry? Have you been having fun with him? Did you tell Molly Weasley to keep an eye on me? She keeps coming over with heaps of food, telling me I'm too skinny and chatting with me about the news and you. She says you've made quite the impression on her sons. Apparently the twins have taken to calling you the Queen of Pranks or something. She says Ron likes you, and according to him, you're all Harry talks about. Honestly, I think Molly misses her kids running about the house. She and Arthur have been good company. I'm not going to lie. I miss you. Life is so unbearably dull without you to brighten every day. I'm actually looking forward to the next full moon. I'm excited to see my fox again, and so is Moony. It won't be long. I've received word from Azkaban. Sirius has apparently started a couple fights. I'm not quite sure what they were about. When we were at Hogwarts, he usually would only get into fights over friends and food. I I still can't believe he betrayed Lily and James like that. They said he was mumbling about us in his sleep. Mostly you. I'm sorry if I put a damper on your mood. I almost didn't tell you, but you always know when I'm holding something back. That's why you're my wife, I suppose. I'll never get tired of calling you that, my wife. Love, Remus. Anna wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, not sure if they were tears, if sadness or joy. She hugged the letter tightly to her chest before carefully folding it and putting it in a drawer where it would be safe. She took out a piece of parchment and her quills and ink and began to write. My beloved Remus, I must be the luckiest girl ever to have you. I am great, thanks for asking. It's not so much the Slytherins that have been rude about my blood status. It's really just Draco being like his father. As for the peacock incident, I resent the accusation. I'll have no, I did not prank Lockhart. I employed 2 other pranksters to do it for me. This may or may not also be part of the reason why the twins call me the Queen of Pranks. I do not fuss. I worry there's a difference. Harry is wonderful. He's so sweet, so much like his parents. We have been bonding quite a lot lately. He's getting better at spells. I'm glad Molly is taking care of you. I didn't tell her to visit you, but I mentioned I was worried about you. Of course the kids love me. I'm the coolest aunt ever. I miss you too. I feel terrible for leaving you all alone in that house. I can't wait to see you again. I can't wait to be in your arms again. You know how I feel about what happened to Sirius Mooney. I think there's more to the story. The facts don't seem to add up, but that might be my wishful thinking. I want to find something, anything, to prove that my brother didn't betray our family. You didn't put a damper on my mood. I want to know these things, and you're right. I do always know when you're holding back some information. It's a girl thing. By the way, I feel the exact same way when I call you my husband. Love, Anna, aka your wife. Anna put the letter in an envelope and sealed it tightly. She wrote Remus's name on it, smiling as she did so before whistling for Avalon, who took it in her beak and flew out the window. Anna followed her to the window and watched her retreating form until she disappeared entirely from sight. She sighed and closed the window. I want my werewolf back. The students in Harry's class were all chattering with excitement and nervousness. All day they had been hearing bits and pieces about the lesson, but apparently everyone had been told not to ruin the surprise. Everyone had bombarded Harry with questions, but the only thing he knew about were the jelly beans and catapults, and those were already out in the middle of the room for the class to see. The desks were pushed to the side, and there was a message on the board for everyone to take a seat on the floor. Finally, the door opened, and Anna walked in with a grin on her face. She stood in front and clapped her hands together. Hello, class. Today we're going to have some fun. Yesterday, I was thinking of the lesson, and it occurred to me that although this is defense against the dark arts, you have not learned any defense whatsoever. So we are going to try a simple defensive spell. Miss Granger, let's let you have a go. Don't worry. I am not going to be shooting any spells at you. Jelly beans will be catapulted from this. I've made sure that they won't hit you too hard, but everyone will be wearing protective eye gear, just in case. Everyone took a pair of goggles and sat back down, except for Hermione, who had moved to stand by Anna after she retrieved her goggles. Anna motioned to Harry. Harry, since you already know how to fire, come and fire them at me first, and then we'll let Hermione have a go. He nodded and got behind the catapult. Anna looked Hermione. Now watch carefully. She looked at Harry. On 3, 1, 2, 3. The beans soared through the air and Anna shouted, Protego Salvus! The beans were bounced back and Anna was left unharmed. She motioned to Hermione to take her place and showed the young witch the proper hand movements. Before moving back and looking at Harry, 1, 2, 3. Hermione copied the motions perfectly and shouted, Protego Salvus! The beans once again bounced harmlessly away from her. Anna clapped and passed Hermione a few jelly beans as a reward. See? Simple. Now I have 4 catapults. I need 4 people to operate them, and then we'll all get in even single file lines, and when everyone has gone, everybody can have a handful of jelly beans. Okay, Miss Brown. Mr. Zabini and Miss Patil, be so kind as to help Harry work the catapults. Don't worry, you will have turns as well. Everybody did as they told, and everybody had it perfected by the end of the period. When class was dismissed, everybody chattered excitedly about the lessons and wished they had her instead of Lockhart. October. Lockhart had come back, much to the students' display. especially when he gave a lecture about how great hair is essential to fighting dark forces, again. Halloween was coming, and Harry and his friends had been invited to Sir Nicholas's Death Day party. Anna winced when they told her, "Be glad I'm going too. Death Day parties are not very appealing to the living." I said yes out of courtesy. "I'm bringing snacks. Bring something for yourself if you can, just in case I don't have enough." They didn't know what she meant until the day of the party arrived. Everyone were ghosts. The music was scratches on a chalkboard, and the food was completely rotten. Ron and Harry looked at Hermione in confusion, and she explained, "It gives the food a stronger flavor if it's rotten. Want some crisps?" She held out the bag she had brought, and the boys quickly nodded. They spotted Anna having a chat with Moaning Myrtle, but Hermione refused to approach. "I don't want to get in a conversation with Moaning Myrtle." Ron and Harry shared a look of confusion. "Who's Moaning Myrtle?" "She haunts one of the girls' bathroom toilets on the first floor." "She haunts a toilet!" Anna came from behind them. "Oh, she isn't so bad, just lonely. She just wants a friend. But I'd stay away from her. She has a crush on Harry." Harry blushed. "She does." Ron clapped him on the shoulder. "Look on the bright side. If you die here, you'll still have a chance of getting married." He blushed even more. Anna ruffled his hair. "Oh, stop teasing him. Anyone want a ham and cheese sandwich? I stopped by the kitchens on the way here." They nodded eagerly and devoured the sandwiches quickly. Peeves came by, and immediately the kids felt nervous. Peeves, the poltergeist that haunted Hogwarts, was feared by all of the students at Hogwarts. "Nibbles?" He offered them a bowl of rotten peanuts. Anna grinned, not fazed by Peeves's appearance. "No, thank you, Peeves. Been up to your usual tricks this evening?" He nodded. "Yes, I heard about your prank on Lockhart from the Weasley twins." "Well done." She nodded proudly. "I do try my best." He nodded and, to the kids' surprise, simply floated away. They looked at Anna, dumbfounded. "How did you do that?" She shrugged. "Peeves doesn't bother us pranksters. It's something I like to call the Code of Mischief. Never prank another prankster unless both pranksters have officially agreed to participate in a prank war." Nick floated over to them. "Enjoying yourselves?" They all nodded. "Oh yes," Anna smiled. "Not a bad turnout." Nicholas nodded with enthusiasm. "The Wailing Widow came all the way from Kent. It's nearly time for my speech. I'd better go and warn the orchestra." But the orchestra stopped playing at that very moment, and all of the guests looked around excitedly. Anna groaned, and the children looked at her questioningly. "What? What's going on?" She sighed. "It's Patrick and his stupid headless hunt. He's going to ruin everything for poor Nick." It was chaos from there. Patrick insulted Nicholas, and it got even worse when Nick started his speech. The hunt caused such a ruckus, Anna shouted, "That is it! Hold my shoes, Hermione, I'm going in!" Hermione took her she is, and they watched as the angry redhead marched into the crowd of ghosts. At that exact moment, Harry heard it. "Rip, tear, kill!" It was the same cold, murderous voice he had heard with Anna. Harry stumbled to a halt, listening carefully. Hermione put a hand on his shoulder. "Harry, what are you doing?" He shushed her. It's that voice again. Harry had told his friends about the voice after their lesson with his aunt. So hungry, for so long. Harry looked at his friends. "Listen." Ron and Hermione froze, watching them. "Kill. Time to kill." Hermione looked over to Anna, who was still giving the headless hunt a piece of her mind, wishing she could get the professor's attention. Something seemed to be seriously wrong with Harry. Harry looked at his friends. "This way!" He ran off, and they hesitantly followed. "Harry, what's wrong?" "Shh! Blood. I smell blood." Anna looked around the room and saw that Harry was gone and started looking around frantically for her nephew. "Harry!" Meanwhile, Harry ran faster toward the voice. Someone was in trouble. Someone was going to die. He had to save them. He shouted to his confused friends, "It's going to kill someone!" Harry suddenly stopped, and Ron nearly collided with him. "Harry, what was that all about? I couldn't hear anything." Hermione gasped. "Look!" It was a ghastly sight. Filch's cat was hanging upside down, and there were words written in blood on the walls. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." Ron gulped. "Let's get out of here." Harry looked conflicted. "Shouldn't we try to help?" But it was too late. People suddenly began filling the halls and surrounded them. Everyone was silent. Harry saw his aunt pushing people aside to get through, obviously having realized what was going on. She finally made it to the center and hugged her nephew tightly. "Oh, Harry, I thought you were hurt. Don't you ever do that to me again." Even then, no one else dared to make a peep until suddenly the arrogant voice of a student broke the silence. "Enemies of the air, beware! You'll be next mudbloods!" Anna saw Hermione flinch and put an arm around the young girl, not showing any fear from Draco's words. She knew if she acknowledged them or signs of believing them for a second, all of the Muggle-borns wouldn't be able to sleep at night. So she ignored them completely, instead opting to look Hermione over for any injuries, just in case. The only thing she saw was the poor girl's blood-stained socks from the puddle on the floor. She opened her mouth to order someone to get Albus when Argus Filch came upon the scene, and he was horrified and angry. "My cat! My cat! What's happened to Mrs. Norris?" Filch's gaze settled on Harry, and he flew into a rage over accusations. Anna immediately stepped up to defend her nephew. "Argus, I am ashamed of you. Keep in mind you are accusing a 12-year-old boy. He is innocent, as are Ron and Hermione." Argus was one of the few members of the Hogwarts staff Anna didn't get along with ever. He didn't like the Marauders any more than he liked the Weasley twins, which would be understandable if he didn't hate everyone anyways. Why would someone who dislikes children decide to work at a school? She decided she might ask Severus that question later. At this moment, the ready of the staff arrived on the scene. Dumbledore told Argus, the trio and Anna to come with them. Lockhart offered his office for the interrogation, since it was the closest. The crowd let them pass, but to make sure no trouble happened while they were gone, she addressed the students. "Attention prefects, head boys, and head girls. You are to ensure that all members, if your house, make it safely to their dorms. No one is to leave there until further notice. This precaution is for your safety. I would advise you follow it. Oh, and another 2 days of detention, Mr. Malfoy, for your outburst earlier. Dismissed." Minerva nodded her thanks to Anna before putting a gentle hand on her shoulder and guiding her to Gilderoy's classroom. The professors were all gathered around the cat, attempting to figure out what exactly had happened to Mrs. Norris. This would have been a whole lot easier if Lockhart wasn't making comments and suggestions every 2 seconds. He seemed particularly keen to cut off anything she or Severus tried to say, most likely realizing they were his biggest competition for the limelight. She glanced at Filch, who she almost felt sorry for, despite all he had done. He was a mess without Mrs. Norris. Finally, Anna cleared her throat, stopping Lockhart and causing everyone to look to her. "If I may interrupt your observations, Mr. Lockhart, Mrs. Norris isn't dead." Argus looked at her with hope. "Not dead? Then why is she all stiff and frozen?" Albus answered for her. "She's been petrified." Anna fought the impulse to point her wand at his throat when he proclaimed to have already known this. Dumbledore continued. "But how I can't say—" Argus immediately pointed his grimy finger at Harry. "Ask him! He did it! He did it!" He went on to explain that he caught Harry reading his leader that identified him as a squib and that the writing in the wall proved it. Snape glanced at Anna from where he stood in the shadows and knew he couldn't just stand there. "If I may speak, Headmaster, Potter and his friends may have simply been at the wrong place at the wrong time, but we do have a set of suspicious circumstances here. Why was he in the upstairs corridor at all? Why wasn't he at the Halloween feast?" Anna immediately spoke up. "He was with me, Headmaster. We were all attending Sir Nicholas's party. He and his guests can vouch for Harry and his friends." Severus raised an eyebrow, and Anna knew what he was doing. She knew he knew she had all of the answers. By asking these questions, it made her case even more convincing. "Why not join the feast afterward? Why go up to that corridor?" To Anna's surprise, Hermione answered, "Well, Professor, we had to leave because the Headless Hunt had rather rudely crashed Nick's party and things were getting out of hand. We left, and because we were rather tired, we made our way here." Snape raised an eyebrow. "Without supper, Miss Granger?" Ron answered this time, finally getting up his courage. "Professor Evans brought sandwiches from the kitchens, and Hermione came prepared with a bag of crisps. We didn't need supper." Snape nodded, satisfied. Filch protested, "They're lying." The headmaster tutted, "Innocent until proven guilty, Argus. Also, I would watch what you say. By claiming they are liars, you are also accusing Professor Evans, whom I trust with my life. As would many other members of the staff, I'm sure." Filch sputtered, "My cat has been petrified." I want to see some punishment." Anna cut in, an edge to her voice. "And you will, when we are sure we have the right culprit. You can't just punish somebody without solid evidence. I assure you, Mr. Filch, your cat can be cured." Albus nodded. "Professor Sprout recently managed to procure some mandrakes. As soon as they have reached their full size, I will have a potion made that will revive Mrs. Norris." Lockhart wasted no time in volunteering. "I'll make it. I must have done it 100 times. I could whip up a mandrake restorative draft in my sleep." Professor Snape cut him off, sending him an icy glare. "Excuse me, but I believe I am the potions master at this school." Anna nodded. "Well, if that is all, let us all head to bed. I don't know about you, but I for one am exhausted." Everyone nodded and went their separate ways. The witch gave Snape a look that told him to wait for her while she talked to her nephew. She kneeled to look at the kids and hugged them all tightly. "I want all of you to get to your house as quickly as possible, no detours." Hermione looked at the professor. "Is it really going to go after Muggle-borns like Malfoy said?" Anna shrugged. "We can't be sure, but stay close." Harry tugged on her sleeve when she tried to leave, and her eyes met Harry's, which were wide and concerned. "What about you?" She gently moved his hand from his sleeve. "I'm walking with Severus, don't worry. Now off you pop." The children nodded and quickly head back. She came around the corner and met Severus. "I got to admit, Sev, I was surprised that you helped Harry. I thought you disliked him." Severus shrugged. "I do. But you probably would have had my head if I had tried to frame your nephew of petrifying a cat and hating Muggle-borns." She smirked. "Oh, I most definitely would. Just ask the Headless Hunt." He chuckled and mock-chastised her. "Didn't your mother ever tell you not to disrespect the dead?" She smiled, and a mischievous gleam was in her eye as she approached the door to her chambers. She opened it and winked at her best friend. "Yeah, but she never told me what to do when the dead disrespected me." Severus shook his head and headed to his own room. Anna skipped through the Hogwarts halls. The full moon was scheduled for that night. She'd made an arrangement with Albus in which she was allowed to tend to her husband's illness every full moon and the day after, if needed. She told Harry and his friends that she would be absent, and while they didn't seem particularly happy with the news, they understood. Severus's reaction was ironically more childish than theirs. Sev held a grudge against her husband, thanks to an incident that had revealed his condition to Severus and had nearly cost the Slytherin his life. Severus had grumbled under his breath and sulked. She couldn't blame him. Lockhart would probably be bugging him about the mandrake potion. Anna wanted to make the most of her time with Remus, so instead of her normal robes, she opted for a royal blue tunic with gold designs and a pair of high heels, over which she wore a darker blue hooded cloak. She wore the outfit because she knew Remus loved her hair, and her scarlet locks stood out very well against the blue in the fabric. Anna felt bad for leaving only 2 days after Mrs. Norris's petrification, but she would have felt worse if she left Remus alone for another full moon. The witch got on her broom and flew just outside of the school boundaries before simply apparating all the way to the front door Lupin household. She grinned, pressed the doorbell, and waited a minute, but no one answered. She tried it again. No answer. She rang the bell one more time, but still no one came to the door. Suddenly, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She spun around and found herself face to face with Moony! She hugged him and he picked her up, spinning her around. Red! He was grinning from ear to ear. It just went to show how much Anna changed his life for the better. Never before had he smiled so much on the night of a full moon. He set her down gently, but did not move his arms from around her. "I missed you, Anna." She smiled and gripped his tie, pulling him into a kiss. She let go and winked. "I missed you more." He shook his head, and they went inside. She took off her cloak and hung it by the door and kicked off her heels, which had already begun to hurt her feet. "So, how have you been doing without me? You haven't been living on frozen dinners, have you?" He chuckled. "No, I actually tried my best to eat a homemade meal most of the time. Don't worry, though. You'll always be the master chef in this house." She smirked. "Thank you, but I wasn't worried. We're having lasagna tonight, by the way." He pulled her to the couch and she laughed and reacted her head on his shoulder. He tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "How have you been? Has anything interesting happened at Hogwarts this year?" She hesitated to answer. He probably didn't know about the cat. Should she tell him? It was too late, though. She had stayed quiet for too long. She could already feel his big, sad, brown puppy dog eyes fill with concern. Anna? What is it? What's happened? She sighed and explained, The other day, something disturbing occurred. Filch's cat was found petrified and hung upside down, and there was a message, written in blood. He breathed. What did it say? She looked down and whispered, The chamber of secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. Remus paused to decipher the meaning of the words, and his eyes widened at what the words implied. Anna, you're Muggle-born. No, not just Muggle-born, you're you. You are the closest magical relative to Harry Potter. You are an aura. You've openly supported and protested in favor of everything Voldemort despises. What would happen if you got hurt? Anna quieted her husband with a soft kiss. You worry too much. There's only been one victim, and it's a cat, and it wasn't killed. It was petrified. There will be a cure once the mandrakes are ready. Even so, it is my responsibility to help protect the students at the school. It's not just us anymore, Remus. We have Harry and his friends to think about. Besides, if this thing really is going to start picking of students, they'll need a defense against the dark arts teacher that actually knows how to defend themselves against the dark arts. I love you with all my heart, but I can't leave now. It's probably nothing. For all we know, it could be Peeves going a bit too far in his pranks. I'll be fine. They both knew she was just trying to make him feel better, but Remus decided not to ruin their time together. He kissed his wife on the forehead and checked his watch. You better get cooking now if you're going to get that lasagna done by dinner. She smiled. Thanks, Remy. Remus watched his wife disappear into the kitchen and went to his desk. He got out his parchment paper, ink and quills and began to write a letter. Dear Severus, please don't burn this letter before reading it. This is important. I know we don't exactly see eye to eye, but if there's one thing we both care about, it's my wife, Anna. I'm assuming you are aware of the incident involving Mrs. Norris's petrification and, more importantly, the threat that was written in blood on the walls. This may mean that Anna, along with several others, are at risk. I ask you to please try to keep an eye on Anna. I know that you probably were already planning to do this, but I wanted to be assured that someone was there to keep her out of trouble, and as much as I hate it, my wife probably spends more time with you in that school than any other staff member. It's not that I don't trust her. She just seems to attract as much trouble as James did in school. Remus. He folded the parchment and put it in an envelope. Remus whistled for Arthur, who chirped happily before carefully picking up the letter and flew off. Remus groaned in frustration. He and Severus were in the most awkward situation ever. They were the two men in one amazing woman's life. Severus and the Marauders had always had trouble sharing Anna. In school, it had almost felt like they were at war. Whenever Anna would be talking to Snape and one or all of the Marauders approached, everyone would tense, and the only person who would remain oblivious was Anna. Sure, she noticed when they insulted each other or something, but she never seemed to feel the wave of tension that always filled the air. James. He never liked the Slytherin. There were several reasons why. The most obvious one was that he and Severus were complete polar opposites in personality. It was also the fact that James was raised by very rich parents, and he had a very strong dislike for Slytherins, and so did Sirius. He had a good home life. Remus didn't know much about Severus's background. He couldn't get a peep from Anna about it. Remus knew it couldn't have been good, though. So, naturally, he hated James because James's life seemed perfect to Severus. James and Severus had also both fought over Lily, of course. James was pretty awful to Severus, but Remus knew the boy had good intentions. The Marauders were very close. When they first formed the group, they agreed to always protect each other. James wouldn't admit it to Anna, but he obviously saw the Slytherin as a threat to her and to the group. James and Sirius were always fiercely protective of Anna because she was like their sister. Peter always just backed James up. Remus sighed. He honestly felt a bit protective himself. He could already tell that the next time he saw Severus, it was going to be full of tension. Time skip. Dinner was delicious, but it was over quickly. Now it was time to prepare for his change. Anna looked at her husband. Did you take your wolf's bane every night this week? He shook his head. Sorry, I forgot on Thursday, and by the time I remembered, it was too late. She bit her lip, but shrugged. If wasn't really a problem when it wasn't on school grounds. As long as no one was on their property, she could easily keep Moony in check in her fox form. It was only ever a problem when there were other people around in human form. Mooney will let her be with him while she's in human form sometimes too, after she gets him calmed down enough to recognize her as her. Without the potion, Remus wouldn't have control, but that isn't a problem because she managed to familiarize herself with her husband's werewolf counterpart. However, if she was in human form, Mooney was still very protective of her, so it was important that no one came near them during this time. She brought out a metal briefcase, protected by the shielding charm. She packed in its spare clothes and a knife for emergencies. It was routine for them now. She and her friends did it every month during school, and when they began living together, she took over the responsibility of taking care of Mooney. She glanced at him. "Ready?" Remus pulled her into another mind-blowing kiss. "Now I am." Anna changed her clothes so she wouldn't get her nice robes dirty. She wore a comfortable, long-sleeved burgundy shirt with a pair of muggle jeans. She had on her dark brown combat boots and slipped on a red hooded cloak to keep out the cold. She grabbed the metal case off the bed and closed the bedroom door. She quickly clambered downstairs to join Remus at the door. She took his hand and squeezed it before opening the door and heading out into the forest, her love right behind her. Once they had traveled deep enough, Anna took out her wand and protected the area from outsiders. The area they lived in was hardly ever touched by anyone else, but she couldn't risk anything. She looked up at the moon, gasped. Anna put her wand up and looked at Remus. "It'll be any moment now." He nodded. "Go ahead and change." She flung off her red cloak, leaving it in a ball by an old oak tree. She took the briefcase and hid it in a bush. Anna closed her eyes, took a breath, and she felt herself begin to shrink. Remus smiled. He loved her animagus form. Foxes were always beautiful creatures to him, and it fit his Anna very well. His smile disappeared when he felt a bolt of pain shoot through his body and his bones began to shift. He saw Red hide behind a tree, not wanting to watch the painful process. His back cracked, and he let out a shout which quickly turned into a howl. He felt his mind get drowsy, and his consciousness began to slip. He tried to fight it for a second before relaxing and letting Mooney take control. Anna chanced a glance at Remus and saw that he was done with his transformation. The werewolf was now on all fours, sniffing the air in excitement. He smelt something. She realized it was her he smelled. She quickly moved out from behind her tree and approached the enormous wolf. Mooney brought his snout down and sniffed her, before nuzzling her neck and licking her cheek. If she were human, she would have sighed in relief. She let out a cheerful yip, and her eyes sparkled with mischief. Mooney watched her carefully, getting into a pouncing position. Somewhere in his animal brain he understood the meaning behind her actions. It was playtime. Without warning, the fox dashed off with the werewolf bounding after her. She weaved in and out of trees, taking twists and turns. She stopped behind a blackberry bush, hoping the sweet berries would hide her scent. She was proved wrong when Mooney approached the bush, leaned down and licked her, as if to say, "You're it." She barked and licked his nose before trotting back to the clearing where they started. Then she heard a hiss. The fox looked to her left and jumped with surprise. It was a big black snake. She growled out of instinct as the reptile watched her, its slimy tongue flickering in and out as if mocking her. It prepared to lunge, but it never had a chance. A large snout with big, sharp teeth snatched up the creature and flung it into a large tree about 20 yards away. The hissing stopped, and the werewolf looked to his little fox and licked her protectively. She yawned and walked over to the oak tree where her cloak still sat. Mooney stretched and curled under the tree, and Anna quickly curled into his side. She didn't even bother turning into her human form. Mooney drifted off to sleep, and Anna followed his example. Next morning, Anna woke up to an already dressed Remus petting her. The fox stretched her limbs before closing her eyes and changing back into a human. Remus smiled tiredly, but he didn't seem nearly as exhausted as he usually was. "You got Mooney to sleep again," she grinned. "It's one of my many talents. Besides, you got tired after we played hide-and-go-seek." He stumbled a bit without warning, and she sighed. This was probably the part she hated the most, the aftermath. The witch steadied him and looked at him with concern. "Take it easy, Remus. You may have gotten sleep, but you're still drained. Come on, let's get you back to the house, and I'll make breakfast and you can rest. Maybe we can go out later if you're feeling better. We could go to Diagon Alley or the Burrow, or we can get chocolate from Honeydukes." He smiled wearily. "You're a saint, Anna. I don't know what I'd do without you." She plopped him on the couch and covered him with a quilt and gave him a book to read. He was about to start reading his book when there was a tap at the window. It was Arthur, the owl. He opened the window with magic, and his bird flew into the room and dropped the letter in Remus's lap. Dear Mutt, I am not an idiot. Of course I've heard about the petrification of Argus's feline friend. Who do you think was out in charge of making the antidote? I am well aware of what the words imply, and believe me when I say that I will try my best to keep Anna safe from harm. You are right, for once. I was already planning on keeping her safe. The full moon was last night. I hope you didn't give Anna fleas. Also, don't ever compare Anna to James. She is above him. Severus Snape. Remus shook his head in exasperation. That man never changed. He folded the letter and placed in his pocket. Anna walked in with breakfast. It was just French toast and eggs with orange juice. She couldn't go too big on breakfast. Sometimes he felt a bit ill in the morning. She pecked him on the lips. How are you feeling? He chuckled. Terrible, but a lot better thanks to you. Her eyes softened. Get some rest, Remus. Call for me if you feel better and don't lie, I can tell. Time skip. Dinner time. Remus, are you hungry? I made your favorite. He grinned, now only slightly tired. Steak? She nodded. And for dessert, chocolate cake with fudge icing and chocolate chips on top. He stood up and kissed her cheek. You know me too well. She laughed. Come on then, your feast awaits. They sat down and ate. He looked up from his steak. So, does Harry play Quidditch? She beamed with pride. He's a seeker. Severus hates it because the Gryffindors are winning more games now. Remus smiled knowingly. You practiced with them, didn't you, Anna? She smirked. Now you know me too well. They loved it, though. I kept the snakes from stealing the field, and I showed them the old-fashioned techniques we used back in the good old days. He laughed. I bet you made quite the impression on them. Molly says Fred and George are trying to find ways to prove you as their blood relative. She said that they insisted that you are too much like them not to be related to them. Anna grinned behind her tea. Well, I can't say I'd be disappointed if they were proved right. I'm already teaching them in the ways of the marauders. Remus shook his head with a smile. Time skip. After dinner, they got ready for bed. Remus walked out of the bathroom and smiled softly at the sight that met him. His wife was in bed in her red pajamas, reading a novel under the warm glow of the lamp on their bedside table. Her red hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she bit her lip lightly like she always did when she was thinking. He didn't know what could possibly be more beautiful. She looked up from her book and saw him looking at her and waved him over, and he joined her. They laid there in comfortable silence, enjoying each other's company. After a few minutes, Anna broke the quiet. I'm going back tomorrow morning. He sighed sadly. I know. She rested her head on his shoulder. Starting then, it'll be all school and magic and students. I'm going to miss you. He kissed her forehead. I'll miss you too. You know, Anna, if you don't want to go back to Hogwarts, you don't have to. She looked at her husband in surprise. I want to go back to Hogwarts, Remus. It really is wonderful being back there. He nodded but frowned after a minute. Has Lockhart been bothering you again? She shrugged. Yeah, but I've been getting better at ignoring it. She studied his face, and her eyes filled with concern. Remus, you aren't seriously jealous of that complete numbskull, are you? He sighed, but said nothing. She kissed him. Remus, you are the most intelligent, kind, chivalrous, noble, humble, funny, sensitive, brave, honest, talented, handsome guy I've ever crossed paths with, and you are 50 times the man Lockhart is. I don't care about his money or his fame. I love you with every fibre of my being, and I will never stop, never ever. He kissed her cheek. Sweet dreams, Red. Good night, Moony. With that, Anna switched off the light, and they both drifted off to sleep. Do you have to go, Red? Said Remus as Anna made her way out the door. She turned and smiled sadly. You know I do. He sighed and reached into his jacket pocket. At least take this to remember me by. She gasped and out her hand over mouth. Remus, it's beautiful. He placed it on her palm and she held it into the light. It was a shiny, round gold locket with an extricate carving of a fox on the front. She opened it and smiled. In the first half was picture from her school days. The marauders and Lily were all laughing and goofing off by the lake. James was chasing Sirius, who had stolen his friend's wand. She, Remus, and Lily were all gazing up at the pair with amusement from their places on the grass. If you looked close enough, you could even see Remus and Anna's hands, which were inches away from touching. The second half of the locket was empty, and Anna looked up in confusion. "It's for a picture of Harry and his friends. I thought you would want to put in your own picture," Remus said. She closed the locket and put it around her neck before wrapping her arms around her husband's neck. "Thank you, Moony. You don't know what this means to me." She kissed him deeply and pulled back. "I couldn't have married a better man, werewolf or not. Goodbye, Remy. See you soon." He smiled. "Goodbye, Red." He watched as the fox raised her wand and disappeared. Time Skip Anna sighed with a smile when Hogwarts came into view. It was like having two homes. When she finally made it inside of the castle, she hurried upstairs to change into a pair of her usual attire. Dumbledore had a strange system, which Anna had come to love. Like most magic schools, Hogwarts professors had to wear a uniform. However, they could choose their uniform. Teachers could have up to 4 different outfits of their choice to wear on a daily basis. Anna's first had been a set of black robes, similar to what the students wore. Then, there were her maroon robes with good embroidery that was meant to represent her Gryffindor door pride. Her third outfit was an elegant white blouse that she had paired with a black pencil skirt, and she usually matched them with a pair of flats. And her last ensemble was an emerald green tunic with a celestial bronze cape, which sounded flashy but was really nothing out of the ordinary when it came to wizard attire. Dumbledore didn't really enforce this rule very much, but everyone followed it. Most teachers only wore one uniform. Anna tried to take advantage of the rule. She also had several cloaks, many with hoods, to wear over them. There was just something she loved about them. She changed in her black robes and wasted no time heading downstairs. It was dinner now, so she wouldn't have any classes. It was Remus's fault, though. He had such a sad look in the morning when he realized she would be leaving so early in the morning that she couldn't help but call the headmaster to ask for more time. Albus had generously offered to give her until dinner. She had spent the day with the werewolf buying chocolate at Honeyduke's, having a picnic for lunch, visiting the Weasleys, and just goofing off and talking like always. It was a pretty nice day, all in all. She had been roaming through the hallways, trying to figure out what she would do since she wasn't hungry, when she heard arguing. It had turned out to be Ron, Harry, Hermione, and Percy. Percy was scowling at his brother. "Do you care what this looks like? Coming back here while everyone's at dinner?" Ron was glaring just as fiercely, and Anna was struck with the similarities between the argument the two Weasleys were having and the fights she used to have with her bossy older sister, Petunia. She would probably have to talk to Ron about that. "Why shouldn't we be here?" Ron stated hotly. "We never laid a finger on that cat." Percy did not dare question that, instead tried taking a different route, guilt. "That's what I told Ginny, but she seems to think you are going to be expelled. I've never seen her so upset, crying her eyes out." Before Percy could finish, a voice interrupted them from the shadows. "Now, Percival, aren't we being a bit dramatic?" The Perfect straightened when the professor stepped out from her hiding place. "Professor, I apologize. I was just telling Ron—" She cut him off with a motherly look. "Percy, you look like a nervous wreck. I understand this ordeal has been stressful for all of us. I will look after these 3 so they don't get hurt or in trouble." Percy looked relieved. "Thank you. That would be great." The Perfect began to walk away, but Anna called to him one last time. "And Percy, you didn't hear it from me, but I happen to know that there is a list of possible head boys that Albus keeps, and you, Mr. Weasley, are at the very top. So don't worry so much. It stresses you out and stress clouds judgment." The Perfect beamed at Anna and nodded vigorously. "Yes, Professor Evans, and thank you." She smiled kindly and shooed him away, before turning to her nephew with a triumphant grin. She opened her mouth to speak, but was cut off by Harry. "Aunt Anna!" He hugged her, and she squeezed him tightly and ruffled his hair. "Hey, Harry, did you miss me?" He grinned up at her. "Absolutely." Ron was looking at the professor in her amazement. "I can't believe you managed to get Percy off my back. He's the most stubborn out of all of us. I've been trying for years." She smirked. "He's just like my sister Petunia when she was around his age. There is no way to reason with a bossy, know-it-all older sibling. You have to use flattery." Ron nodded as if committing her words to memory. "So, what you said about him being first in line for head boy was a load of rubbish." She shook her head. No, he is first. I was just using the information to my advantage, and he really does need to chill put before he hurts himself. I never thought I'd manage to find someone who came close to being as uptight as Petunia. Harry smirked. He could definitely see a little of his Aunt Petunia in Ron's brother. Ron looked up at Anna with interest. I knew Harry had another aunt who was terrible, but it never occurred to me that that would make her your sister. I wish I had a fun aunt like you. I only have 2 great aunts. They are both strict and unpleasant. I like Aunt Muriel the best, but that is only because she doesn't smell as bad as Aunt Tessie. Anna winced in sympathy. That's some rotten luck, Ron. But do they care about you? Ron looked up in confusion. Of course, they're family. Anna bit her lip. Ron, Harry is my only living flesh and blood family that is willing to even think of me as a human being and not a freak, and I'm the same for him. Appreciate the relatives you have because, trust me, I would do anything to have what you have. But if you need an aunt, I would be honored to call you my honorary nephew. Molly is probably already planning on sending me a Weasley sweater for Christmas anyways. Not to mention the fact that I have red hair. I could easily pass myself off as a Weasley. That is, if you'll have me. Ron blinked, as if trying to process that question. Of course. He smiled, but frowned when he was able to take in the rest of her lecture. I never thought of myself as lucky before for having so much family. You're right. Too much family is better than no family at all. But you do have a family, not flesh and blood, but still family. You have me and my big family, and Hermione is a family too, and who knows who else. He knew she considered Snape as family, but just the thought of him being related to a snake like him made him cringe. Anna pulled Ron into a half hug. Thanks, Ron, that means a lot. Now, we have to get you 3 back to the common room. I still don't trust these halls. That cat was petrified by something. Do me a favor and be careful, you 3. I know I won't be able to stop you from doing your investigations, but I don't want you hurt. Remember, this year is different. You have an adult who trusts your word. I can help. Oh, and you should talk to your sister, Ron. If Percy's telling the truth, she's scared and needs her brother. And I have a feeling you're the one who can help. They came to the common room and they said their goodbyes. Anna began to wander the halls when a cold hand clamped on her arm. Aguamenti! She shouted the first spell that popped into her mind, and icy blue light flowed from her wand out if her wand. She felt the stranger's grip loosen and pulled free. Anna gasped once she saw who her attacker had been. Oh dear, Sev, I'm so sorry. I'm a bit on edge. Mrs. Norris's petrification has made me jumpy. She continued to apologize to Severus, who was soaking wet from the stream of water that Anna shot him with. The potions master sighed. Had it been anyone else, he would have been absolutely furious. But this was Anna. Besides, he couldn't exactly blame her for her reaction, and he was lucky, really. He could have been hit by something far more painful than water. He snapped out of his thoughts when he realized the poor Ginger was still apologizing profusely and rambling like she always did when she felt guilty. He tried to cut in, but she didn't hear him. It came to the point where he had to grip her gently by the shoulders and get her to look him in the eye. Anna, it's fine, really. I shouldn't have scared you like that. I would have done the same. He waved his wand and his clothes and hair dried instantly. Anna smiled and motioned for him to walk with her. So, what did you want to say before you scared me? He shrugged. I just wanted to ask if you wanted me to walk with you to your room. You aren't the only one that was put off by the incident with Argus's cat and that message written in blood. She smiled a little at the gesture. Of course. But can I just ask? Do you think this thing or person or whatever will really strike again? Do you think that it will target Muggleborns and Squibs? I mean, isn't it possible that it means something else? Professor Snape considered it for a moment. It is possible, but one can't be too careful. It's best to stay prepared for another attack. It is also true that the message could have multiple meanings, but I'd rather not take the risk. Besides, you look tired. You must have missed a lot of sleep on the full moon. Severus was stunned when he saw the mutt had sent him a letter. He couldn't stop thinking about it for the rest of the day. It made him realize that Anna could be in danger. He already lost Lily. Anna had to live. The letter had annoyed him too. He had refused to acknowledge the marriage between the two. The mental images were far too horrifying. He hoped he never had to see them together. He doubted he would be able to keep his lunch down. The friends made it to Anna's dorm and said goodnight. They both fell asleep rather quickly. Both of their minds were tired of thinking. The next day in Lockhart's class. It took all of Anna's resolve for her to withhold the urge to best her head against the wall. The defense against the dark arts class had turned into Lockhart reading selections from his book. He had even went as far as to act them out. Harry seemed to be picked the most for these reenactments out of all of them, and Anna, of course. Today he decided it would be a good idea to tell the story of his encounter with Werewolf. Oh boy. Gilderoy picked Harry to be the werewolf. Nice loud howl, Harry. Exactly. And then, if you'll believe it, I pounced. Like this. Slammed him to the floor. Thus, with one hand, I managed to hold him down with my other. I put my wand to his throat. I then screwed up my remaining strength and performed the immensely complex Homorphous charm. He let out a piteous moan. Go on, Harry, higher than that. Good, the fur vanished, the fangs shrank, and he turned back into a man, simple yet effective, and another village will remember me forever as the hero who delivered them from the monthly terror of werewolf attacks. Finally, the bell rang, and the students filed out as Lockhart reminded them he would be signing copies of his new book. Anna was prepared to dash out of the room when she saw Hermione approach Lockhart with her friends behind her and ask for permission to get a book from the restricted section, making sure to use plenty of flattery. Lockhart, not one to disappoint, signed the paper without even looking at it. Anna caught up with them in the hallway. You know, I would have signed that for you. Hermione smiled apologetically. Sorry, Professor, but we didn't want anyone to tie it back to you if we're caught. Anna nodded and let them be. Later, in the abandoned girls' bathroom, Hermione groaned in frustration. This is the most complex potion I've ever encountered. I don't even know if we can get all the ingredients. Harry thought for a minute. What about Snape's ingredients? Hermione nodded. He might have everything we need, but there's no way he won't notice his ingredients missing, and when he does notice, we'll be the first he'll suspect. Ron shrugged. We could ask Anna. Harry shook his head. I don't want to risk her job because of Malfoy. If we go to her, she'll want to know what we're up to, and she might be cool, but she's still a professor. She's not going to let us do something like this. Hermione bit her lip. We'll have to stick with Snape. We might be able to get an ingredient or two from Anna if we ask for leftover ingredients to practice, but we can't jeopardize her job. She has done so much for us already. Anna breathed in deeply, her eyes shut. Ah, nothing like the smell of freshly cut grass on a Quidditch field in the morning, right, Oliver? Oliver Wood smiled, oozing with confidence. You bet. I can't wait for today's match. We'll show the Slytherins that we don't need Malfoy's father. She patted his back. I like your enthusiasm, Wood. Today, the professor sported her own brand of an evil smirk. Quidditch was something her and Severus always got competitive over. The Slytherin didn't play the sport himself, but that didn't stop him from relishing in every Slytherin victory and Gryffindor defeat. The potion's master had a habit of betting too, and this year he placed a bet with Anna. It was nothing that would make either teacher broke, but it was enough money to make the friends determined to win. So she had made sure to show up at their last practice. So, Anna said, where are your players? As if on cue, mischievous laughter was here, and before Anna and Oliver could turn around, 2 brooms zoomed over their heads, effectively ruining Anna's hair. Oi, watch the hair! She smiled as she heard Fred and George chuckling. Our apologies, Your Majesty. They did a grand bow and flew back down as the rest of the players began to enter the field. After an hour of practice, Anna went to the kitchens and got food from the house elves, who were always happy to help. After they had eaten, Oliver kept his team for another half hour of practice, and Anna decided to call it quits and go back inside, only to be stopped by Gilderoy Lockhart. Later, Snape saw his friend walking through the halls struggling with a load of books, a sight he had often seen in their school days, and fell into step beside her. Really, Anna? I thought you got over your studying habits when school ended. Let me carry some. She smiled with relief and let her friend take a few before making a face. Trust me, Sev, I'm not planning to read a single word of these books. They're Lockhart's. He's making me bring them all to the library because he realized that they don't offer them to check out. Snape rolled his eyes and took the rest of the books out of Anna's hands. Well, in that case, he dumped them all into a trash bin that they happened to be passing, and she grinned. Have I ever told you you're awesome? He smirked. Well, it doesn't hurt to hear it twice. She snickered and punched his shoulder. Shut up. So, ready to watch your house get annihilated by the Gryffindors? The potions master shook his head. Those dunderheads are no match for the cunning of the Slytherins. Haven't you ever heard of brains over brawns? Anna laughed and elbowed him lightly in the ribs. Gryffindor is the house of the brave, not the house of the dumb. He shrugged. Bravery can be dangerous. Fear is a survival instinct. I wouldn't call the ability to ignore that instinct a good thing. It could get you killed. The Slytherin looked at his watch. You better go get ready. I know you love to dress up for these kinds of things. She nodded her thanks and bid him goodbye as she made her way to her rooms to get ready on the Quidditch field. Anna now sported her Gryffindor robes, her Gryffindor hat, her foam lion paw, and her Gryffindor scarf as she made her way down to the teachers' section of the stadium. Of course, she sat between Severus and Minnie. Those two were 10 times more competitive than she and Severus were. She looked to the corner of the section they sat in. She had put in an old leftover broom to make sure that if anything happened, she could get down to the field as soon as humanly possible. Quidditch was, by no means, the safest sport, but that's what made it so fun. The voice of the announcer came on and she watched intently. The Gryffindors came out and were met by a mix of boos and cheers. Madam Hooch ordered for the captains of each team to shake hands. As usual, the enemy captains sent threatening stares and gripped the other's hand with more force than needed. But Flint looked a little put off and confused by the knowing gleam in Wood's eye. The Slytherin captain had no idea that Anna had taught them new moves. The whistle sounded, the ball went in the air, and Flint zoomed to get the first hit on the quaffle, but the ball was hit away by the back of Wood's broom, and the Slytherin cursed. Anna's attention, however, remained fixed on Harry as he searched for the snitch. Draco yelled something at the boy who lived, but the Gryffindor had no time to acknowledge this when the bludger, which had followed Harry the minute it was launched into the air. The surprised Gryffindor quickly dodged it, and George, who was a beater alongside his brother, shouted to Harry, "Close one, Harry!" The Weasley streaked past the Seeker and deflected the lethal ball away from Harry with a powerful whack, only for it to circle back round, ready to clobber Harry again. Once again it was hit by George, but it acted as a boomerang and went after Harry again. Anna stiffened in her seat. Something was wrong. Bludgers never fixated themselves onto one person. Her hands were fists. If this was some snake's idea of a prank, she would be none too forgiving. Harry could be killed by something like this. Minerva noticed the younger woman's worried look and rising anger and put a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Don't you worry, dear. Harry is fast like James and smart like you and your sister." Anna sighed in relief as they called time out. When Oliver made his way over, they began arguing. So grabbed the broom from the corner, not caring that everyone's eyes were on her as she rocketed down to the ground. She enveloped Harry in a hug. She turned to Oliver. "What have you guys decided?" Oliver's eyes met with a smirking Flint and grimaced. "We're continuing the match. Harry wants to, and this is the only way we'll win." She glared, but before she could do anything, Wood signaled that they would resume the match, and everyone flew up. Anna stayed down on the Quidditch bench. She was seething, but there was nothing she could do. At least the rest of the team seemed angry with Oliver as well. Draco actually had the nerve to taunt Harry and throw him off his game. Anna was so furious, her face matched the red in her robes, and everyone was sure that her hair would actually burst into flames. She was shaking, biting her nails, and she looked like a nervous wreck. The witch tried to convince herself everything would be fine, and she almost believed it. She couldn't have predicted what happened next. Anna got to her feet when she saw her nephew aim his broom right at Malfoy, before leaping off his broom and catching the snitch. Anna cried out desperately with tears in her eyes and got on her broom. She heard Sev bellow her name as she felt Harry land on top of her with an incredible amount of force, effectively breaking his fall. She heard screams and shouting and commotion. George was shouting at Oliver, "Get the snitch or die trying. What a stupid thing to tell him." She heard a familiar voice trying to keep her awake, but dismissed it. She was exhausted and in pain, and her eyes were drooping. The last thing she saw was a blurry face leaning over her before everything went black. Anna hated being hurt. She utterly despised it. She never understood why people took sick days. It's so boring. You just sit there and try to pass the time, and in a place with no televisions or any electronics, it was even duller. She just sat and read books, and randomly turning objects into other objects for entertainment. When she had first woken up, Her bed had practically been surrounded by people. Most of the staff, including Hagrid and Dumbledore, the Weasley kids, Hermione, her nephew, was in the bed next to hers, and plenty of other students who apparently cared a great deal for the professor. She even realized that a couple ghosts kept sticking their head through the walls to check on her, and it was overwhelming. As you could imagine, the expressions on their faces before she had woken up weren't exactly happy. Everyone looked morbid, as if they were expecting her to die at any moment, which was ridiculous considering Poppy had already told them that her injuries, while painful, were not fatal in the very least. It touched her, though. When she woke, students were sitting on the empty beds playing cards, among other things, to pass the time. Adults were having quiet conversations. Minerva and Albus were fighting over whether or not they should contact her husband. Ron and Harry were half-heartedly playing wizardle chess. And Sophia and Hermione were looking at a notebook, probably looking over Sophia's poems and stories. Severus didn't seem to notice the others. He had somehow managed to claim the single chair that sat right next to Anna. His expression was one of sorrow and desperation with the tiniest twinge of anger. Why hadn't the bloody game been stopped when the bludger started trying to kill Harry? It was rather obvious that there was absolutely no way that situation was going to end well. He wanted to be angry at Madame Hooch or Albus or even Harry, but all he could do was sit there with his hand almost glued to his friend's palm. No one had noticed she had woken up. Severus was the first to realize when he felt the hand he was holding tightly squeeze back. It took a moment for him to process the movement in his brain. When he had first saw her hit the ground at the Quidditch match, there had been a loud, hollow thud, followed by a series of sickening cracks. After that, his mind had reeled. It had been running a mile a minute trying to figure out how to help his friend and piece together exactly what had exactly happened. His brain just felt tired now. Now he snowed his head up quickly, and he let out a breath when his black eyes met her shimmering green one, and she gave him a small smile. "Hey, Sev, what did I miss?" Everyone's head snapped towards her. All of a sudden she was surrounded, and she smiled and laughed in amusement as everyone started talking to her at once. Finally, Poppy's voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "Excuse me, you're crowding the patients. They need to rest. Come on, out you go, dears." Everyone opened their mouths to protest, but the look the nurse gave them shut them up, and they all began to file out of the room. She sighed and looked around until her eyes fell on Harry, who was right next to her. He looked guilty. Anna winced slightly as she rolled to her side, but her look of pain quickly morphed into concern and understanding. "Harry, it's not your fault." Harry shook his head. "No, it is. Even if you don't blame me, I'm just not used to someone being so willing to throw themselves in front of me to keep me from harm, so I take risks without thinking. And now we're both in the infirmary. You have a broken rib, fractured wrists, bruise, scrapes, and a minor concussion. Meanwhile, here I am with just a boneless arm." Anna's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "What? How?" He smiled a little bit at her concern. "Lockhart." Anna scowled and muttered under her breath. The witch picked up her locket and began to fiddle with it, drawing her nephew's attention to the small gold trinket. "What's that? I haven't seen you wear it before." She smiled wistfully. "My husband, Remus, gave it to me not too long ago." Harry nodded with a small smile. "He must mean a lot to you." The tips of his aunt's lips turned upward into a sort of gentle grin as her thumb traced the lines of the fox. "You have no idea, Harry. He's so handsome and smart, and he has the most wonderful laugh." Harry grinned. "I'm looking forward to meeting him then." Anna's head snapped up and she returned his grin. "Really?" He laughed at a response and nodded. "Yeah, I'd love to. Do you think he'll like me?" She nodded enthusiastically. "Are you kidding? He'll love you. You're brilliant, Harry. Your parents would be proud. I remember James used to go on and on about you non-stop when you were born. Lily and I must have taken 1,000 baby pictures. Now, you are such a kind, brave, intelligent young Gryffindor. Trust me, Harry. Remus will be as proud to be your uncle as I am to be your aunt. I should arrange for you two to meet." Harry smiled. "I'd like that. Anna, I think we mentioned this before. Can I stay with you this summer?" Anna smiled. "I'd love for you to come, Harry." Her smile faltered slightly. But there may be a problem or two. Harry sputtered. What? She closed her eyes tightly. Harry, there's a chance that the ministry won't allow that to happen. I can't just whisk you away from the Dursleys without permission, and I'm still waiting on a response. I don't know what will happen. It was true. The ministry and Anna weren't on the best terms. They didn't really approve of her rebellious tendencies, and she knew that they probably thought that Remus was dangerous. She really wasn't sure what they would say, and it broke her heart to think that Harry would have to go back to live in that dreadful house with her awful sister. Anna shuddered just thinking about the Dursleys, but it wouldn't be up to her. Harry frowned. They wouldn't say no, right? I mean, why would they? Anna shook her head. I really don't know what might go through their heads. Don't worry about it right now. Harry opened his mouth to protest, but Madame Pomfrey chose that exact moment to come in with her little cart. She stopped at Harry's bed first. You're in for a rough night, she said as she reached for a bottle labelled Skelly Grow. Regrowing bones is a nasty business. She poured the steaming liquid into a beaker and passed it to him carefully. Anna scrunched up her nose. Be careful, Harry. That stuff burns your throat a bit. He nodded uneasily and gathered enough all the Gryffindor bravery he could muster before downing it quickly. He put down the beaker and eagerly gulped down the glass of water that had been placed by her bed. Poppy brought her cart to Anna and tutted almost motherly, shaking her head. I knew I'd see you in here sooner or later. I should have known you'd get in yet another Quidditch accident. Anna chuckled but winced slightly as the pain front her ribs shot through her. Poppy frowned and patted her hand. Don't you worry, dear. I'll have you fit as a fiddle in no time. Healing bones are much easier than regrowing them. Poppy gave her a potion and a quick spell. Anna smiled. Thanks. I'm feeling better already. Madame Pomfrey smiled slightly. Yes, well, even if you do, you aren't getting out of here until morning. I need you here for observation, and I think Mr. Potter would enjoy the company. Anna nodded. Of course. Midnight. Anna woke up that night to the sound of a loud crash and voices. One was Harry's, definitely. The other was unfamiliar. It was high-pitched. She forced her eyes open and squinted at the figure in the moonlight. Harry? What are you doing talking to a house elf in the middle of the night? The two figures froze, and the small creature flung himself onto the side of the professor's bed, sobbing and pleading for forgiveness. Anna smiled sadly and spoke to the poor elf in a calm, soft voice. It's all right. Please, just... What is your name? She gently picked up the small elf and sat him carefully into the edge of her bed, giving the elf a kind, encouraging smile. Anna was very familiar with the house elves. There were several in the Hogwarts kitchens, and plenty of the richer wizard families owned them. She had grown quite fond of the Potter family's house elves, Wanda and Chip. They were lovely and polite. Chip was a bit more energetic and eccentric for a house elf, and worried a bit too much, but he was very nice, just a bit shy. Wanda had been very kind and sweet and happy to help. This was why she felt sorry for Dobby. Almost all house elves loved to serve. The problem was, many greedy wizards took it for granted and treated the defenseless creatures like dirt. Anna had seen it firsthand many times. She was none too pleased by how the masters treated the elves. Anna made a mental note to make that her next goal, get the house elves' rights to leave their master if they please. The creature looked up at Anna with curiosity at her kindness. Did Dobby, miss? Dobby coughed before stating more firmly, My name is Dobby. Anna smiled slightly. He had a cute name. What are you doing here so late? Dobby looked at her as if trying to decide whether or not he should run away or tell her the truth before finally relenting. Harry Potter must not stay at Hogwarts. Harry Potter is in grave danger. The professor's eyes widened. Danger? Dobby nodded, but before he could say any more, his large ear twitched and he gasped. Dobby must go now. Goodbye, Harry Potter. Good luck, Mrs. Lupin. Good luck? She had no time to ponder the subject when she heard what Dobby heard, footsteps approaching. Anna looked over to Harry and saw him flip over, so he appeared to be sleeping. Anna decided to stay where she was. She was a teacher, and she didn't need to eavesdrop like she used to when she was a student. She let out a breathe. Colin Creevey, the energetic, though slightly irritating first year, was stiff and pale and being carried in by Albus himself. Anna, who was still in the pajamas that the hospital provided, wasted no time getting out of bed, ignoring the protest she got from her colleagues. She sat on the end of the bed, and smoothed the small boy's hair, trying not to look in his eyes. When Anna had pictured a petrified human, she had imagined a stoic-faced, emotionless figure similar to that of a corpse or a coma patient. She had been wrong. This was worse in a way. Colin's normally smiling face was morphed into an expression of pure terror. It pained her to see a child like that. Anna was glad that Harry was not Muggle-born. She couldn't bear to see him like that, frozen in fear. McGonagall had gone to go get Madame Pomfrey, but was back quickly. The old woman sighed when she saw Anna's broken expression. That girl was a saint. She always felt responsible when something like this happened. Poppy was the first to break the morbid silence between the four of them. What happened? Another attack, said Dumbledore. Minerva found him on the stairs. For the first time, Anna looked up at her favorite teacher and saw the worry and pain in the old yet strong woman's eyes. The professor never let her students get away with anything, unlike Professor Snape, but she had always felt very close and protective of her students, the Gryffindors especially. Minnie spoke up, her voice only wavering slightly. There was a bunch of grapes next to him, she said sadly. We think he was trying to sneak up here to visit Potter. Anna's gaze drifted to her nephew's form, which was tense. I can't say I blame him. I would have done the same thing when I was his age. Anna stared at the boy for a minute, briefly zoning out of the conversation. Then she noticed that there was camera clutched in his grasp. After a moment of hesitation, she tentatively brought her hand to the device and pulled until the boy's fingers finally let go. You don't think he managed to get a picture of his attacker? Asked Minerva. Anna passed the camera to Albus. He was the headmaster after all. Dumbledore carefully pried open the back of the camera. Good gracious! Exclaimed Madame Pomfrey. Steam spewed out of the camera, and the unmistakable scent of burnt plastic took hold of the crisp night air. The insides had been melted. What does this mean, Albus? Professor McGonagall asked urgently. You don't think he managed to get a picture of his attacker? Asked Minerva. Anna passed the camera to Albus. He was the headmaster after all. Dumbledore carefully pried open the back of the camera. Good gracious! Exclaimed Madame Pomfrey. Steam spewed out of the camera, and the unmistakable scent of burnt plastic took hold of the crisp night air. The insides had been melted. What does this mean, Albus? Professor McGonagall asked urgently. The headmaster was hesitant to answer, and then he takes a deep breath and says with a sorrowful expression, It means that the Chamber of Secrets is indeed open again. The four adults were silent for a moment, absorbing his words, the confirmation of their fears. Anna spoke first. Who could do that? Albus shook his head. The question is not who, but how. The question is how. Everyone went quiet for a long time. Professor McGonagall sighed after a while and put a comforting hand on her former student's shoulder. I think we could both use a nice cup of tea. The corners of Anna's lips twitched, and she put her own hand over the professor's. A cup of tea would be lovely. The pair quietly left the room. Anna knew that they needed sleep for tomorrow, but she dismissed the thought. There was no way she would be able to sleep now. Tea had always been a tradition of sorts for Anna and Minerva. Whenever something bothered or upset or confused Anna in her school days, she would go to Minnie and they would have tea and talk. Minerva had always loved the girl like a daughter. She enjoyed telling Anna her opinions and sharing stories and laughing. The tea always helped calm both of their nerves after stressful situations, which was why the two had decided to continue their little sessions. Minnie poured the tea and Anna nodded in thanks, adding her usual amount of sugar. Minerva fixed herself her cup, put in her sugar and milk and stirred the cup. She set the small spoon down along with her tea and looked at her former student. He was a first year. He was a nice kid, average student, a bit naive and talkative, but he didn't deserve this. Anna smiled sadly. She was referring to Colin, of course. Well, obviously, someone thinks otherwise. He's Muggle-born, and to some people that means he has contaminated, corrupt and damaged genes that have no place in the wizarding world. Voldemort's followers say that their deaths are justified. They may even be under the delusion that they are heroes. But they aren't. They're cowards. The whole lot. Minerva raised an eyebrow. She heard the irritation in her voice, the loathing tone she spoke with. You're angry? It wasn't a question. Anna was angry. Colin wasn't her favorite student, and she wasn't going to pretend he was, but these kids were special to her. Someone couldn't just waltz in and do something like this. It didn't bother her when it was Filch's cat. The thing was old, anyways. She was pretty sure he had first gotten Mrs. Norris as a kitten when she was in first year. Anna sighed. Minnie, I've had to deal with people making fun of me and my sister and treating us like second-class citizens ever since I came here in first year. Sure, most people didn't think that, but the kids who did, the bullies, they didn't go away, nor did they grow up and mature and become better people. They just sought out power and became stronger. I had my friends to help deal with them when I was in school, but who is going to protect these kids now? This time, apparently, they aren't pushing people down and calling them names and pulling nasty tricks. Now, it's unforgivable curses and petrification. McGonagall paused for a moment before speaking. It's possible it isn't a person who is doing it. A creature, maybe. Anna shook her head. A creature that can write on walls and can identify a person by blood status. If it's a creature, it has to have help. But it has to also be in the castle. You can't apparate at Hogwarts. Whatever it is, it's on school grounds, waiting, watching. Anna picked up her tea and took a sip, pausing to look at the other professor. Her eyes softened. So you found him? That had to be scary. Minerva's eyes fell to the floor. I thought he was dead when I first saw him, she whispered. Anna reached over and took the older woman's hand. Don't worry, Minnie. He will be fine. Severus will finish the antidote as soon as he can get the ingredients, and we will find a way to stop this from happening. Minerva smiled slightly. You are still the same old Anna. So caring, so smart, and always right. Anna returned the smile warmly, and the two teachers finished their tea in comfortable silence. 2 days later, you could feel the fear radiating from the students. The tension was unbearable, and everyone either seemed eager to gossip about the incident or determined to avoid the topic altogether. Others looked scared out of their wits. Ginny Weasley was one of those people. Anna didn't really know why she was so frightened. She was a pureblood after all. Perhaps she was just frightened for her friends. Either way, the professor wasn't just going to ignore her when she saw the girl curled up in the Gryffindor common room early that morning, looking rather upset. Anna crouched down to eye level. Hey, Gin, need to talk? The girl hesitated but nodded, and Anna pulled her up by the hands, taking her to the couch where they could sit together. The youngest Weasley wiped her tears. I don't know what's wrong with me. Anna's eyebrows furrowed. What do you mean? The first year looked up at the professor with wide eyes. I think I'm going mad. I've been having memory loss and I've been feeling so drained lately, and I've been feeling very strange. Anna smiled comfortingly. Ginny, breathe. You are not insane. I have met the insane. I have been to Azkaban. You're probably stressed. This whole ordeal has taken its toll on everyone. You sat next to Colin in charms. No one can blame you for being upset. Not to mention this is your first year. I'm sure you have your own issues. She nodded. I have hand-me-down everything. I have my grades to worry about, and I have to live up to my parents' expectations and deal with my brothers teasing me and pressuring me about it. Even Ron is making Mum and Dad proud, being friends with the famous Harry Potter and saving the school, even if he did steal the car. Anna stroked her hair. You'll be great. Ron always says the exact same thing about his brothers. Just do what feels right. Don't pressure yourself. Let your greatness come naturally. I can help you if you have trouble in class. If their teasing gets too bad, come to me. I'll set 'em straight. Ginny smiled. I can see why my brothers like you. You really think I'll be great one day? Anna nodded. You have the potential. You can't second-guess yourself, Gin. You aren't Ginevra Weasley, the weak, defenseless little sister. You're Ginny Weasley, and you can do anything you set your mind to. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. The professor pulled Ginny to her feet. Now run up to your dorm and get ready. The others will be waking soon. We can be the first ones to breakfast if we hurry. As the day went on, Anna had started to notice students clutching talismans and amulets and lucky charms. She wasn't quite sure even Neville Longbottom, a pure blood, was taking extra precaution. He claimed he was almost a squib, which was a load of rubbish in Anna's opinion. She had started to grow a soft spot for the boy, and she hated how lowly he thought of himself. Second week of December. Harry and his friends were certain that Draco was responsible for opening the chamber and were still looking for answers. They had been planning to use the Polyjuice potion during Christmas because Draco had suspiciously signed up to stay at Hogwarts during the holidays. However, Harry didn't know what he'd be doing for the holidays. He wasn't sure if Anna wanted him to go to her house or if he would be staying. But before they could this, they needed the last of the ingredient from Snape's stores. They managed to pull it off, with Harry as the distraction and Hermione as the thief. It hadn't been a very nice experience for the rest of their class, who had been splashed with the swelling potion they were making. Meanwhile, Anna felt bad for the students and was about to offer her assistance when a black owl landed next to her with a letter. She put a nut into the small pouch on its leg and it flew off. Anna opened the letter and read it carefully. "Dear Mrs. Lupin, we regret to inform you that your request to become the legal guardian of Harry James Potter has been denied for safety reasons. You may reapply next year, but for the time being, Mr. Potter will remain with Mr. and Mrs. Dursley for the following summer and winter holidays. Warm regards, Cornelius Fudge." She crushed the letter in her fist and sighed. She had a feeling this would happen, but she didn't think they would go as far as taking away their holiday with each other. It was Christmas. She went looking for Harry. Anna found her nephew by the bathroom, moaning Myrtle haunted. She didn't ask. She just told him to come with her. She brought him to an empty corridor and broke the news. "Harry, there's been a change of plans regarding our holiday plans." She wordlessly passed the wizard the wrinkled letter and watched his expression as he read. He looked heartbroken. "I have to go live with Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon this summer. I understand that, but they can't seriously make us be apart on Christmas, can they?" She knelt down to eye level and gripped the young wizard's shoulders gently. "Not if I have anything to say about it. Maybe I could go home for Christmas Eve and come back at noon on Christmas Day. They can keep you from coming to my house, but they can't keep me from coming here to see you. I'd stay for Christmas Eve, but I promised Remus I'd come on the holidays." Harry smiled. Yes, he was disappointed that he wouldn't be going to Anna's, but he had just realized that he would finally get to spend Christmas with the people he actually considered his family. Ron and Hermione would be there, Anna was coming, Hagrid would probably be staying, and he couldn't ask for anything more than that. How could he? The Dursleys gave him hangers and socks for Christmas, and that was when they actually remembered to acknowledge his existence. He was mad about having to stay with the Dursleys over the summer, though. What gave them the right? Why would they keep him with relatives who were so cruel? They kept him under the staircase for Met of his life. The young wizard looked at his aunt questioningly. Why would they do this? Anna sighed. They don't like me very much, and they like you because of the affect you have on the public. They want you alive, but they don't care much about what would make you the happiness. Don't worry about it for now. We'll get them to let you live with me next summer. He nodded and went off to his friends. A week later, Severus found his friend early that morning and did not hesitate to pull her aside. I need your help, Anna. She raised an eyebrow. Really? Whatever for? He smirked. The school is starting a dueling club and Lockhart and I are teaching it. She let out a bark of a laugh. You against Gilderoy Lockhart? That's hardly a challenge. You'll knock him off his feet with a single spell. The Slytherin nodded. So, I convinced the idiot to let me duel him and someone else to help further educate the children, and I want you to do it. Anna began to pace. So let me get this straight. You, my best friend, want to have an epic battle in front of the children in order to teach that whiny, no-good loser Lockhart a lesson? He nodded curtly. Precisely. The redhead spun around to face him with her signature smile and a mischievous gleam in her eye that all the marauders were known for. How could I refuse? Harry and the other students crowded the stage, excited to see what was in store for them. Their enthusiasm, however, diminished when Professor Lockhart jumped onto the stage. Gather round! Gather round! Can everyone hear me? Can everyone see me? Unseen by the students, Severus and Anna rolled their eyes in unison from their spot hidden from the crowd. She hadn't told Harry she would be here, to keep it a surprise. Gilderoy threw off his cloak, and Anna's head peeked out the entrance to the room in time to see several young girls, with obviously bad taste in men, swooning and fighting tooth and nail to get the phony wizard's cloak. She shuddered in disgust, but kept her head out. Nobody would see her unless they looked behind them. Gilderoy put his arms out as he grinned idiotically. Now, Professor Dumbledore has granted me permission to start this little dueling club, to train you all in case you ever need to defend yourselves as I myself have done on countless occasions. For full details, see my published works. Now, let me introduce my assistant, Professor Snape. Severus gave Anna one last look before making his way to the stage emotionlessly. He tells me he knows a tiny little bit about dueling and has sportingly agreed to help us out with this demonstration. After our duel, the winner will duel a surprise guest dueler. Now, I don't want you youngsters to worry. You'll still have your potions master when I'm through with him." Anna held back a laugh when she saw Severus roll his eyes. The professors got into their positions and raised their wands. As you can see, we are holding our wands in the accepted combat positions. On the count of 3, we will cast our first spells. 1, 2, point 3. Without hesitation, the potions master shot out his first spell with a swift flick of his wand. Expelliarmus! Anna had to bite her fist to prevent her laughter. The look on Lockhart's face was hilarious. He bounced back quickly, though, jumping back up with an uneasy grin. "Well, there you have it. That was a disarming charm. As you can see, I've lost my wand. Ah, thank you, Miss Brown. Yes, an excellent idea to show them that Professor Snape. But if you don't mind me saying so, it was pretty obvious what you were about to do. If I'd want to stop you, it would have only been too easy. However, I felt it would be instructive to let them see. Anyhow, this means Severus will be dueling our lovely guest assistant. Please give a warm welcome to Professor Evans." The heads of several bored Gryffindors snapped up and cheered, along with students from some of the other houses. Anna made her way to the stage, smiling as she went. When she got to the middle of the catwalk, she addressed the crowd. "Thank you, Professor, for that, adequate demonstration on disarming spells. Me and Professor Snape were talking, and we thought it would be beneficial for you to see a full-on battle. Do not worry, we will not be aiming to kill, and we are both heavily trained in these sorts of duels. I can also assure you that no students will be caught in the crossfire as long as no one puts their hands on the stage. You will not be doing these types of spells yet. You will be doing disarming spells. If you are ready, Severus, I think we should go ahead and begin. In this particular duel, we will be allowed to use any spell that comes to mind, as long as it does not kill the opponent. Please be aware that many of the spells we will be using will be dangerous and are not to be used unless a teacher tells you to." Snape nodded and got into his position, readying his wand as Anna did the same. She nodded to Lockhart to start counting. 1, 2, 3. Severus didn't dare go easy on Anna. Knowing she would get angry if he did so, he started with a fire spell, Incendio. Anna smirked and was quick to counter it with a water spell, Aguamenti. The students stood in awed silence as the blue beam met reddish-orange in a spectacular display of clashing elements. Snape's fire was put out, and he furrowed his brow and opened his mouth to shout another spell, but the fox advanced forward and said her own, Flipendo! Snape was thrown back, and many students gasped in horror, but Anna didn't move. She knew her friend could handle it, and he did. The Slytherin got up with incredible speed and flicked his wand back at her. Incarcerus! A rope appeared from nowhere and shot forward, ready to tie Anna up. The Gryffindor countered it. Protego! As the rope flung back, Severus quickly did away with it. Deletrius! The rope disintegrated in mid-air. Anna didn't have time to cast another spell before the potion master opened his mouth again. Stupefy! She dodged it quickly and casted another spell, which was also dodged. Severus smirked before using one of Anna's previous spells, Flipendo! This one, she wasn't able to dodge, and she was immediately flipped backwards into the wall behind her. Harry craned his neck to see if his aunt was okay, but he couldn't quite see over the crowd. Anna didn't get up. Severus strode over to her, standing above his friend. He was about to turn her over when she suddenly turned, rolled over to face him with a sneaky grin. Ducklifors! The Slytherin's eyes widened, but before he could defend himself, he was turned into a duck. She was beginning to think that turning people into birds was going to become a running gag. Lockhart grinned and stepped forward. Anna is the winner. The witch bowed and turned her friend into a human once more. He looked slightly irritated but shook her hand. They were pretty equally matched when it came to dueling. He was just glad that it didn't end with one of them in the infirmary. Again. Ron turned to his best friend. Why didn't you tell us your aunt was a dueling master? That was brilliant. Did you see Snape's face? Harry nodded excitedly, feeling a sense of pride swelling in his chest, and he had to bite his lip to keep from chuckling. The head of the Slytherin house's expression had been pretty funny. He looked at Hermione and, for the first time, he realized how much the young witch looked up to the professor. It occurred to him that Anna was the only adult witch in her life. Her parents were muggles, and she didn't hang around the other female teachers that much. It made sense that she would see his aunt as a role model. He could see Hermione becoming a Hogwarts professor or an aura like his aunt, though maybe a little stricter. The girl could be fierce when she wanted to be, and despite the amount of trouble she got in with him and Ron, she was a stickler for the rules. Lockhart announced that he would be splitting the students into pairs, and before Harry knew it, he was staring right into the glaring eyes of his least favourite Slytherin, whose face was morphed into an unbecoming sneer. His own face was probably his usual dumbfounded expression. He really didn't know why he was always put in these situations. He quickly turned his face into determination. If he was going to duel, he was going to win. It was his turn to make his aunt proud. He readied his wand. He realized he was lucky. He had helped his aunt when she had done the lesson on defense when Lockhart was absent. She had shown him a few defense spells. He could do this. Draco shifted slightly. He didn't like how Harry seemed so confident. Despite all the Gryffindor accomplished, the boy normally seemed so nervous. But now he had a gleam in his eye and it threw the Slytherin off. He knew he had to do something. Scared Potter? But still, his rival's expression didn't change. His determination didn't falter. You wish? The blonde smirked. You sure? Because if I had a mudblood as mother... Anna lunged from the sidelines, and Severus was just barely able to keep her from tackling the boy. Detention, Mr. Malfoy. 30 points from Slytherin. If I hear that word one more time out of your mouth... Draco glared at her and focused on his opponent, who, if anything, looked even more determined. Well then, he would have to play dirty. No way was he going to stick to disarming spells and let Potter steal the limelight. Again, he wasn't going to give Potter a chance to win. 1, 2, 3! Serpent Sorcerer! Harry backed up as a long black snake was plopped in front of him. Hermione gripped Ron's hand from the sidelines, though neither him or her noticed. Anna glared. 50 more points from Slytherin! Keep your distance, Harry! That snake is poisonous! Snape put a hand on her shoulder to calm his friend. Don't move, Potter. I'll take care of it. He really didn't care for the boy too much, but once again he couldn't stand seeing Anna so upset. Lockhart, stupid as the day is long, stepped forward. Allow me! He waved his wand, but instead of vanishing, the snake was launched several feet into the air. Now, the reptile was not only angrier, but also closer to Harry. Anna glared at Lockhart. Ducklifors! The man made a much better bird than a professor. The snake, however, did not go for Harry. It turned and directed its rage towards Justin Finch-Fletchy. Not knowing what to do, Harry shouted at the snake, "Leave him alone!" But those were not the words that everyone else heard. In the place of English, they heard a series of hisses and harsh-sounding ancient words that sent a shiver up their spines. Anna sucked in a breath. The snake moved its attention to the boy who lived and looked at him with curiously in its cold, black, soulless eyes. You would think that Justin would have been grateful or relieved, but when Harry looked at him, he was furious. What do you think you're playing at? Anna didn't really pay attention to it. She was too busy panicking. All of a sudden, she couldn't think of the spell. She needed the enchantment that made the snake disappear, but she couldn't think. But then an idea struck her. Ducklifors! The snake was a duck. She had turned the snake into a duck. Professor Snape shook his head slightly and let out a short bark of a laugh and waved his wand, and the duck was gone. But now that the reptile was done with, all attention turned to Harry. Every student was, at that moment, judging him, and he didn't feel a thing. All he could do was stare at the spot the snake or duck had been, still as a stone. His head was down, but if you could see his eyes, you would see the haunted look in them. His brain felt foggy and strange, and tongue felt like a brick in his mouth, weighing him down, keeping his feet from moving an inch. Anna motioned to Ron and Hermione, and they came up to the stage and tugged his robes silently. He didn't notice until Ron spoke. Come on, mate. His trance was broken, and he walked away, following his friends. He tried not to pay attention to the whispers he heard as he passed. Anna slipped away from her friend, following the trio in the hallway. Once there, she got on her knees, looking at her nephew, searching his wide, confused eyes with a hand on each shoulder. He felt better when he saw that Anna wasn't looking at him the same way his classmates were, like he was a monster or something. She did the opposite. She was looking at him sympathetically, and she stroked his hair. Oh, Harry. He looked down. What's wrong with me? Her eyes hardened, and the grip on his shoulders tightened ever so slightly. Nothing. You are wonderful. I don't care what power you have. I know you enough to know that you wouldn't hurt a fly. You're a parcel mouth. He swallowed. What does that mean? She sighed. Tell me, Harry, have you ever talked to a snake before? A memory flashed before his eyes, and he slowly told her about the encounter. Last year, on Dudley's birthday, before I went here, we went to the zoo. I talked to a boa constrictor. It told me it had never been to Brazil. I didn't really think anything of it. I thought I was crazy back then, and when Hagrid came and told me accidental magic was why strange things were always happening around me, I thought maybe that was why. Ron's eyes were wide. A boa constrictor told you it had never been to Brazil? Harry shrugged. So? I bet loads of people here can do it. It suddenly occurred to Anna that he really had absolutely no idea what was going on. Anna shook her head. Harry, that power is very rare, and I'm sorry to say it comes with a very bad reputation. Harry glared at the room they had left. But if I hadn't told the snake not to attack Justin? Hermione cocked her head. Is that what you said to it? Now Harry was even more confused. What do you mean? You were there. You heard me. Hermione shook her head calmly, knowing he was feeling distressed. I heard you speaking parcel tongue, snake language. No wonder Justin panicked. You sounded like you were egging the snake on or something. Harry gaped. Now it was starting to make sense. I spoke a different language, but I didn't realize. How can I speak a different language if I don't know how to speak it? Harry still didn't see why everyone was making such a big deal about it. Do you want to tell me what's so wrong about stopping a massive snake from biting Justin's head off? What does it matter how I did it, as long as Justin doesn't have to join the headless hunt? Anna nodded. I know, and you're right. But when I said it came with a bad reputation, Harry, I really wasn't kidding. Salazar Slytherin was well known for speaking parcel tongue, which is why snakes are the mascot for the Slytherin house. Harry's eyes widened, finally starting to see the severity of the situation. Ron nodded. Now the whole school is going to think you're his great-great-great-great-grandson or something. Anna rolled her eyes. That's absolutely ridiculous. James comes from a long line of Gryffindors. He told me about it 1,000 times. He was very proud of that. He liked to think he was a descendant of Godric Gryffindor himself. As for Lily, she's Muggle-born, so that's impossible. And there's no way Salazar Slytherin was involved with a Muggle in any way. Ron held up his hands on surrender. Hey, I'm not saying it. I'm just telling you what the whole school is probably thinking right now. The ginger squirmed as if he was being examined under a magnifying glass. Anna took a second to analyze Ron and Hermione. Hermione, as she suspected, didn't seem too bothered by this new ability her friend had discovered. The only reason she had known what Parseltongue was all the time she spent reading and studying. She was raised by Muggles, so she didn't have anyone to influence her opinions or fill her mind with fables and rumors. However, it was clear that Ron was struggling, which was good. Ron had basically grown up learning to hate Slytherins. He was raised by particularly vocal parents with very strong opinions on the subject. It was like how Draco was raised to hate Muggles and Muggleborns. She found it admirable that, despite his strong views, he was still willing to believe in and trust Harry until he had reason to believe the rumors. She imagined that if it had been someone besides his best friend, he would not be so lenient. This proved to her that he truly trusted Harry and had a strong bond with him. As for the possible relation to Salazar, she really didn't think that was true, and even if it was, that didn't say anything about Harry, did it? He was kind and selfless and brave. Not once had she ever caught him using someone to their advantage or acting cruel. Just the thought of someone accusing her nephew of being something so terrible lit a fire that raged inside her and engulfed her entirely. She had come to realize that, although their time together has been brief, she was incredibly protective of him. She felt like a mother bear looking after a cub. Looking at the innocent boy, the one who reminded her so much James and Lily, she felt like she would do anything in her power just to make sure he didn't skin his knee. It really was a mystery how Draco Malfoy was still alive, or Voldemort for that matter if he was in fact back. She decided not to think any more on it. The professor looked to Ron and Hermione. Thank you, but I think I should talk to Harry alone. If that is all right with you, Harry? The corner of his mouth turned upwards. Yeah, it's all right with me. Anna ruffled his hair and his half-smile turned into a full one, and she pulled him into her side as they walked to her room. Harry looked at his aunt curiously as they made their way up to the teacher's wing of the castle, where all of the professor's dorms were. Similarly to the entrances to the 4 houses, each room had a painting guarding the door with a password. This was a precaution that was put into action after students started sneaking in to steal test answers and pull pranks. She sighed happily at the memory. She had a truly terrible herbology teacher one year. He hated Anna, so the marauders visited his dorm often, leaving little surprises for their beloved professor. He quit before they even got halfway through the school year. To this day, Anna considers it one of the marauders' greatest accomplishments. Teachers got to choose their paintings if they wanted to. Most didn't care too much what it was. Lockhart had chosen a picture of himself, of course. Anna had chosen hers with much more thought. It was a portrait of 2 deers, a buck and a doe. The buck was sturdy and stood proudly, but mischief twinkled in its eyes. The doe looked gentle, but not fragile or weak, and her eyes were kind. They looked like peaceful guardians to Anna. She placed her hand gentle but firmly on the painting and whispered, "Avalon." She knew it wasn't very creative, using the name of her owl as her password, but she didn't know what else to use. The corners of Harry's lips turned upwards into a hesitant smile as the buck bowed and the portrait gave way beneath Anna's hand. They walked in and the door closed by itself, with a soft click. Teachers were obviously given more luxuries than the students, though Harry didn't really mind. He figured most of them deserved it. There were 2 comfy red recliners that were separated only by a small oak coffee table with a tea set and a book with a ribbon bookmark inside. Anna grinned at her nephew. "You like the room? I've made a few changes. Go ahead and sit. I just need to get the tea. It helps me relax and think. You don't have to have any, but I've got biscuits." The Gryffindor nodded. "Thanks." She disappeared, taking the tray with the tea set with her, and returned quickly with the tea. Harry lifted his teacup, inspecting it, and noted in amusement that they were Gryffindor-themed. They were scarlet with gold trim and the classic lion symbol on them. She poured the tea, and he added milk and sugar. As he sipped, he couldn't help it let his mind wander to all the times he had to fetch tea for the dreaded Dursleys. His smile dimmed, knowing he would have to go back. Anna cleared her throat, setting down her cup and beginning her speech. "People are irrational and complicated. They seem to forget all of the good things about you as soon as something that is considered bad is revealed. And what's worse, they assume. They assume that because Muggleborns aren't born from magical folk, they are weaker. They assume that just because you are in a certain house, you think or act a certain way. This is, of course, not exactly true. I've seen cowardly Gryffindors, kind Slytherins, foolish Ravenclaws, and traitorous Hufflepuffs." She took a second to sip her tea before continuing. "I want you to know that Parseltongue does not make you evil. It does not control your actions or define you in any way. It is simply a skill, and it may even save your life one day." She winked, and he smiled a little, but it vanished as soon as it appeared, and his eyes fell to his hands. "But what if I am related to Salazar?" She cut him off bluntly. "Harry, I don't care if you are related to the Dark Lord himself. You are also related to me, and I know you aren't a killer or anything of the sort. You have not given me any reason to believe otherwise." Harry shook his head. But the Sorting Hat almost put me in Slytherin." She nodded, having suspected it. "That may have been because you were a Parselmuth. Listen to me, Harry, because this is exactly why I wanted to talk with you. If you want people to believe you, you have to believe in yourself first. Don't doubt yourself, because there is one thing you know for sure." The Gryffindor looked at her curiously. "What?" She grinned and straightened his tie. "You are Harry James Potter, and nothing on this earth could change that." He grinned as his confidence slowly began to reform. His aunt had that effect on him. It may have been because he never really had a mum or anything, and it just felt wonderful to know that he had someone he could trust. He left her room, and he quickly wiped the smile off his face, knowing that it would look bad if he was smiling after he attacked Justin. He was still nervous about it the next day when he was with Ron and Hermione. There was a bad blizzard that forced Professor Sprout to cancel class, so they had free time to do what they wanted. Hermione and Ron were playing wizard's chess, while their friend fretted about the dueling incident until he finally decided to try talking to Justin and tell him his side of the story. Unfortunately, it didn't go as planned. He found a group of Hufflepuffs and was about to ask them where Justin was when he overheard their conversation. Ernie was telling his fellow Hufflepuffs Harry's diabolical plan. It was the most infuriating conversation he had ever had the displeasure of overhearing. He ended up storming out of the room after having a heated argument with Ernie. It was ridiculous. He would never stoop to Malfoy's level and hate Muggleborns. It made him furious, but he knew arguing more wouldn't solve anything. He had a conversation with Hagrid and proceeded to stomp up the stairs and down the corridor when he tripped. He looked to see what he tripped over and saw the paralyzed form of Justin Finch Fletchley. He gulped. This wasn't good. With Anna had been going to the library to return a book when she heard the commotion. She ran until she came upon a familiar scene. Harry was surrounded, and next to him, there lay Justin, frozen in horror, and floating above him was nearly headless Nick, floating but still obviously paralyzed. This time, Ernie Macmillan was the first to speak, and he pointed his chubby fingers at no other than her nephew. "Caught in the act!" Anna growled. She never liked Ernie anyways. Minnie snapped at Ernie to be quiet and repeated the command with Peeves. Anna quickly went to stand by her side. "Everyone, back to your house!" Her tone was sharp and left no room for complaints. The students filed out, and she followed Professor McGonagall and Harry to Dumbledore's office, seething. Once in his office, McGonagall left without a word, leaving Anna alone with her nephew. She sighed. "I'm sorry, Harry." He looked up at her in surprise. "It's not your fault." She shook her head. "I promised Lily and James I'd protect you, and I failed." He gripped her hand. "Don't say that. I'd be in even more trouble if it weren't for you. You haven't failed. I'm not hurt or dead. I haven't even been given detention for it yet." She squeezed his hand and smiled. Harry looked around the office curiously. There were many strange things on the shelves and his desks. Anna grinned with a mischievous, "You know, I came here a lot when I was a student. At first, it was because I turned Lucius Malfoy's hair hot pink, but sometimes I would come for advice. He's one of the wisest people you'll ever meet, even if he's a little strange. He told me the stories behind all the knickknacks in his office." She pointed to a small silver hand mirror with an emerald-encrusted handle that rested on a shelf behind the desk. That mirror is supposed to show the person who looks into it their past, but the last person who owned it accidentally spilled some sort of potion on it, and now it only shows what you had for breakfast that morning. Albus bought it because he found the story amusing. Harry laughed. She gestured to a chalice made out of mahogany with swirled designs. "That turns whatever liquid you put in it into butterbeer. He won it in after someone challenged him to a chocolate frog race. He claims it is one of his most prized possessions." She then walked over to his desk and held up the seemingly ordinary crystal candy dish on his desk that was currently full of lemon drops. "I gave this to him for Christmas one year. It looks like a perfectly normal candy dish, but I charmed it so it never runs out of sweets. That way he can offer as many as he wants to others and still have enough himself." Her nephew laughed. "That's clever." She moved to a glittering orb, if amethyst. "This one has a more impressive past. It's a healing orb. It's said that centuries ago a wise wizard brought this orb to a unicorn on the eve of the full moon. The wizard fed the unicorn sugar cubes before humbly asking the creature to touch its horn to the sphere. The unicorn did as he asked and touched his horn to the surface. Do you know who that wizard was?" Harry shrugged. "Dumbledore?" She laughed. "No, close. It was Merlin. The orb developed tremendous healing powers that were used on King Arthur himself. Alas, over the years, the power has faded and it can only heal minor injuries such as paper cuts and small bruises. Even so, it's one of my favorites." Harry smiled a little, always happy to listen to one of his aunt's stories. He knew she was trying to cheer him up, and he had to admit it was working. That is, until he spotted the sorting hat. He walked over to it, not daring to touch it. After a few seconds, he heard it whisper in his ear, "Be in your bonnet, Harry Potter." Harry stumbled over his words. Yes, I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to ask—" The hat cut him off smartly. "You've been wondering if I put you in the right house. Yes, you were particularly difficult to place. But I stand by what I said. You would have done well in Slytherin." Harry shook his head. You're wrong. Anna came up behind Harry and pulled him away as she scolded the hat. You can hush. You're just grumpy from sitting on a shelf for so long. Surprisingly enough, the hat quieted. Suddenly a gagging noise rang out, and they turned to see an old, molted, red bird sitting on a gold perch. Harry looked at his aunt with concern for the poor creature. The bird looked very ill. Half of its feathers had fallen and its gagging was becoming more and more urgent. Anna, though, did not look concerned. She didn't even blink, not even when it bursted into flames. Harry cried out and looked around frantically for a glass of water or a fire extinguisher, anything to save the burning bird. His efforts proved useless as the fire faded and revealed a small pile of ash. Harry was looking at his aunt in pure shock and even a little betrayal, about to ask why she didn't help, when the door opened and a grim-looking Dumbledore walked into the room. Harry began to ramble about how he tried to save it and that he was sorry, but his words died in his throat when the headmaster smiled. About time too. He's been looking dreadful for days. I've been telling him to get a move on. Harry looked absolutely horrified, and Anna took pity on him and smiled at him reassuringly. Harry, that was a phoenix. When they die, they burst into flames, and then they are reborn from the ashes. Go ahead, take a look. He looked down in time to see a tiny head peep out of the ash. The headmaster chuckled at Harry's expression. His name is Fawkes. It's a shame you had to see him on a burning day. He's really very handsome most of the time, wonderful red and gold plumage. They can carry heavy loads. Their tears have healing powers, and they make highly faithful pets. The perch was gold, and it had a bowl just under it where ash-covered Chick now rested. Anna reached over and gently brushed a couple bits of ash off its scalp and calmly pet the fragile creature, being careful to keep her nails away from his skin. It chirped happily and nudged her fingertips with its beak. Anna grinned at Harry. He's such a sweet boy. Where'd you get him? The headmaster's eyes twinkled. A friend gave him to me as a gift. Dumbledore sat at his desk, motioning for the other two to follow his example. His face turned serious. Mr. Potter, I assume you know why you're here. Harry nodded glumly. Anna's eyes hardened, but there was desperation in her voice. Albus, he's a child. He's done nothing wrong. Someone is setting him up. Dumbledore held up his hand calmly. It's all right, Anna. Just listen. All of the sudden, Hagrid burst into the room, and it was quite the sight. The half-giant was clutching a dead rooster, and his eyes were wide and frantic. He had been running, and his words were breathy and hard to understand, and Anna was sure he was going to have a heart attack. She got up from her chair and pulled him into it. The witch summoned a goblet of water and ordered him to calm down and drink it. The groundskeeper was reluctant, but he knew better than to try and defy Anna and sipped at the water. He finally calmed and passed back the goblet, droplets of water still hanging from his beard. Albus, it can't have been him. I was talking to him just seconds before it happened. He's innocent. Hagrid, the headmaster said in a calm voice. I do not think Harry attacked those people. Hagrid nodded somewhat awkwardly and pointed to the door. I'll just be waiting outside then. Albus looked at Anna. Could you please join Hagrid outside, Mrs. Lupin? I just want to talk to Harry alone for a few seconds. The witch looked ready to protest but nodded, knowing the headmaster truly believed Harry was innocent. She squeezed the 12-year-old's hand and ruffled his hair. See you outside, sport. She followed Hagrid out the door, casting one last nervous look at him before sitting the door. Harry looked at the elder wizard curiously. You don't think it was me, Professor? Albus shook his head. No, Harry, I don't. But I still want to talk to you. Harry relaxed, but his sweaty, clammy palms caused his hands stick to the leather arm of his chair. He wiped them on his robes as the professor continued to speak. I just want to ask you if there was anything you'd like to tell me, he said gently. Anything at all. Harry thought about the voice he had heard before the first attack and the polyjuice potion that was simmering in Myrtle's bathroom as they spoke. But then he thought of something Ron had said about how hearing voices wasn't a good thing, even among wizards. He remembered all the dreadful things people were saying about him and the terrifying possibility that he could be related to Salazar Slytherin. He tried to believe his aunt's words that she had given him before the last attack, but it was a bit hard after being told he was a monster for years by the Dursleys to discard that thought when it was beginning to seem true. He couldn't bring himself to tell Albus Dumbledore, one of his biggest heroes, this and disappoint the wizard. He hung his head. No, there isn't anything, Professor. Albus looked as if he was going to push the boy more, but shook his head, figuring he had suffered enough, and sent him away after pressing 3 lemon drops into his palm. One for him, one for Anna, and one for Hagrid. After a few words with her nephew, she took him back to his friends. Before she let him go, she informed him that tomorrow evening she would be going home for about 2 days, but she would be back early Christmas Day. They parted ways, him going to the bathrooms for polyjuice potion, her going to her room to pack and get ready for bed. But she was intercepted by her favourite Slytherin, Sev. He jumped and turned, before smiling a little. She frowned. There were bags under his eyes. "Are you okay? You look exhausted." The Slytherin sighed and nodded. "There's no fooling you, is there? I haven't been getting much sleep as of late." Her concern increased. "Why ever not?" He tried to keep his answer as vague as he could. "I've been experiencing some unpleasant dreams." Unpleasant was an understatement. Dreams of walking into a corridor to find his friend on the ground with her eyes open, skin pale, and body unmoving like a porcelain doll. Dreams of her screams waking him up in a cold sweat. Dreams of Lily being angry at him for not protecting her sister. The more victims the Ayres monster took, the worse the dreams got. Last night, he dreamt he'd found her dead. He wasn't sure he could bring himself to sleep again. Anna sighed, knowing she wouldn't get any more out of her friend. "Well, I'm leaving tomorrow to be with Remus, but I'll be back early Christmas morning with your present." Snape sighed. "I forgot about Christmas with all that's happened." She shrugged. "You don't have to get me anything, Sev." He didn't say anything, but she knew he would get her something anyways. She sighed. "Take a sleeping draught tonight, get some rest, all right?" He nodded, smirking slightly at how motherly she sounded. "Okay, good night, Anne." She hugged him, taking him by surprise. "Sweet dreams, Sev. Take care of yourself." He nodded, his expression soft. She was the only one who could do that. She was the only one who cared. Anna was awoken to a loud knock at the door. Bang! 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 She shouted at the person as she slid out of bed. All right, I hear you. Give me a minute." She was in a long, red silk nightdress, which was very cold without her blankets, so she hurriedly put on her slippers and robe and grabbed her wand before answering the door. To her confusion, Harry and Ron were there looking pretty confused and very concerned. "Boys, what are you doing? You'll get caught if hang around the castle after dark. Hermione's in the girls' bathroom and she won't come out. She said she'd only let you see her." Anna tied her robe tighter around her bodies and nodded. "Take me to her." Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Mere minutes later, Anna was outside the deserted girls' bathroom. She heard weeping from inside and warned the boys not to follow her under any circumstances. "Hermione, it's Anna. What's wrong, sweetie?" She heard the young girl take a deep breath before latching the stall to reveal, "Oh, you poor thing." She was a cat, and she looked absolutely miserable. Anna helped Hermione clean up and stop crying before walking out to warn the boys. She pointed at each of them. "I'm going to bring Hermione to the nursing wing. If either of you dare to laugh at her, you'll have to deal with my wrath. Do you understand me?" Both boys nodded hastily, confused and quite scared. Anna nodded and poked her head back through the bathroom door. "Come on out, Hermione!" The boys gaped, and Ron nearly spoke, but Harry elbowed him, not wanting to risk him breaking their promise and making Hermione upset. "Is she going to be okay, Anna?" She nodded. "She'll be fine, but the next couple weeks will not be pleasant. I'm taking her to Poppy. You better get to bed before you are caught outside your dorms." They reluctantly left, and Anna took Hermione's hand and led her to the hospital wing. Once the young witch was in a white bed, Anna moved to leave, but Hermione called after her. "Anna, wait!" The professor turned, and the girl smiled gratefully. "Thank you for helping me. You didn't have to do that." Anna frowned. "Of course I did. You mean a good deal to me. You keep those boys out of trouble. And most of all, you're a great girl and you have a great future ahead of you. Good night, Hermione. Try to get some sleep." Hermione smiled and let out a yawn. "Good night, Professor." Anna got up and left for her room, feeling a little bad for having to leave the next day, but she wouldn't be putting it off. She missed her Moony, and she wasn't letting anything keep her from seeing him again. Next morning, Anna got up at her normal time, since she already had her bag packed, and went to breakfast. Not many people were there for the holidays. Severus was there, so she got her a plate of croissants, bacon and sausage, before sitting by her friend, filling her goblet with pumpkin's juice. He looked at her, I thought you were leaving this morning. She grinned. After breakfast. Did you get some sleep? He nodded. I took some sleeping draught. Are you sure you should go out in this weather? It's cold. She shrugged. All I'm going to do is fly until I get off of Hogwarts territory and then apparate. He nodded, and they both turned their focus to their plates. Anna finished her food and made to leave the mess all, only stopping at the Gryffindor table to say goodbye. Then she headed to the hospital wing to check on Hermione. Finally, she was ready to leave. Anna made sure to wear warm clothes. She had on a thick red winter cloak, lined with fake fur, because what kind of animagus wore real fur? Under this, she had a red turtleneck and a pair of muggle jeans and brown leather boots. She had on the same sort of gloves they used for Quidditch, lined with soft, also fake, fur on the inside, so she still had full control of her broom. The witch even had on a pair of thick socks and white earmuffs just in case. She, of course, had her Gryffindor scarf too. Anna landed a good ways away from the castle in the thick white snow. Her teeth chattered, but she was still quite warm. She apparated and appeared in the woods in front of her and her husband's wooden house, which now had a roof coated with snow. She had brought Avalon, leaving the cage at the castle. She had a spare cage at their house, and she would never be able to ride a broom with the bulky owl cage with her. The elegant owl sat proudly on her master as they approached the front door. Anna didn't quite know why she had rung the doorbell to her own house, but by the time this occurred to her, she could already hear someone at the other side. Remus opened the doors, apparently in mid-sentence, but froze when he saw her. She jumped into his arms for a hug, and he picked her up, spinning her a little before pulling her into a deep kiss. She pulled away when she heard giggling in the background and blushed when she saw Molly and Arthur, the person, not the owl, sitting in the background grinning. Molly smirked. "Oh, don't stop on our account." Anna pulled away and smiled warmly at her friend, hugging her. "Molly, it's been a couple months since I last saw you." Molly nodded. "Oh, yes. Much too long, dearie. Me and Arthur just came to have a cup of tea and drop off your presents." Anna grinned. "Wait a moment. I have yours." She made the presents appear. They were still wrapped. They got Molly some things she needed, like a new cute apron and oven mitts and a dress. They got Arthur some manuals for Muggle appliances, along with some smaller Muggle things like toys. Molly smiled, thanked them, and headed to the fireplace with their flu powder, muttering something about the two needing some time alone. When the Weasleys were gone, Anna suddenly found her swept into another kiss, which turned into a snog session that left her blushing with cheeks as red as fork's feathers. Anna lightly slapped her husband's chest. "Warn me next time before you sweep me off my feet, you werewolf Prince Charming." Remus grinned. "I can't help it if you look absolutely stunning with snow in your hair." Anna leaned into his touch before pulling away reluctantly to shed her cloak, boots, scarf, gloves, earmuffs, and scarf. She tied her hair into a ponytail. "I was going to make gingerbread cookies from an old family recipe my grandma taught me when I was young. You can help me." They got the ingredients out and mixed everything together. They cut shapes of gingerbread wizards and dragons. They used a cat cookie cutter which they planned to decorate to be a fox and a dog one to be a werewolf. Anna had just put the cookies in the oven, only to turn around and get a pile of flour blown into her face. She glared playfully and threw some back. He began chasing her around the kitchen with flour-covered hands before finally catching her. He spun the giggling girl around and kissed her again. "I love you, my little Red Riding Hood." She smiled. "I love you more than you will ever know, my wonderful wolf." The timer for the cookies went off and she waved her wand, instantly cleaning the flour from the kitchen before taking the cookies out. They decorated the cookies with silly faces and bright colors as if they were children. Later on, they set to work on their tree. It was a bit late to decorate the tree, but they always did it together. Anna waved her wand and several gold lights illuminated the tips of each branch. Soon, they decorated the tree with ornaments they had collected over the years, like the dragon battling the knight and the golden snitch, and a wolf which they glued to a fox ornament. It was a whole wonderful menagerie of cute little mementos from their pasts. They spent a while draining hot chocolate on the couch, just watching it and talking. It was about time for bed when Anna walked over the Avalon's perch by the window, holding a thick red envelope with gold ribbon clutched in her fist. She took out her quill and wrote on the front, "Azkaban, cell 2217, 2, Sirius Black, from Anna Lupin." The witch sighed and held the envelope out to Avalon and told her where to take it and watch the bird take off into the night. She finished off another mug of steaming hot chocolate before taking her place by her husband in bed and falling straight to sleep. Azkaban, cell number 2217. Azkaban was as dreary as always, even during the Christmas season. The only difference was they got better food on Christmas, which was in 2 days, since tomorrow was Christmas Eve. Sirius watched as a guard rolled his heavy mail cart by the cells, dropping off family letters and gifts, which were all inspected prior to delivery. He slumped against the wall. He knew he wasn't going to get anything. He never did. They all probably still thought him a traitor. Even Anna, who'd he'd always seen as a sister to him. He was so lost in his misery, he didn't notice that the mail cart had stopped at his cell until a booming voice called out to him, "Sirius Black!" He jumped and nodded with some hesitation. "Yes?" The large man rolled his eyes before grumbling, "You've got mail!" The envelope was tossed through the bars, and the man scrambled for it before it hit the slightly moist ground, in fear of it getting ruined. He held it gently in his hand and looked at the label before beaming. It was Annabelle. Red had sent him something after all these years. He was so excited he didn't even realize that the label had said Lupin instead of Evans. He wasted no time untying the ribbon and ripping open the small package, and he grinned at what he found. Pictures. She had sent him photographs of their school days. He flipped through every single one until he got to a picture of a much older woman with a man, and he realized with tears in his eyes that these people were Moony and Red. He hugged the photo to his chest and looked back in the envelope to find a letter there, one crisp parchment. "Dear Siri, I know it has been a while since we have last spoken. I'm not sure what to believe. The evidence tells my brain you murdered James and Lily, but my memory tells my heart that the man I knew, the man I considered my brother, would never betray his friends. I honestly don't know what my state of mind is for this letter. I'm still not sure of your innocence, but I know that no man should be alone on Christmas. Merry Christmas, Padfoot. I hope these pictures will make your sentence a little more bearable, and I pray that they will aid you in keeping your sanity. Love, Annabelle." Sirius chuckled softly. "I knew that if anyone would believe me, it'd be you, Annabelle. Merry Christmas." And indeed, for Sirius Black, it was the most wonderful Christmas present he had ever received, knowing that Anna didn't hate him, not completely. Remus had the best morning he'd had in a long while. He woke up with his arm around his beautiful wife and watched the falling snow. He took a blissful moment to look at her closely. Her red hair stood out drastically against the soft white pillows. He was still trying to figure out how he managed to get someone so wonderful and gorgeous and brilliant for a wife. He'd say she was his dream come true, but he had never dared to even dream that he would find someone so accepting of him and so kind and brilliant. His wolf side took to her just as much, often becoming too protective of her, as Moony saw her as his mate just as much as Remus saw Anna as his wife. It seemed no matter what form he was in, he just couldn't bring himself to hurt her. Anna thought it was cute. She sometimes even compared his beastly counterpart to a teddy bear or puppy of all creatures. It still amazes him today how she could overlook such a humongous flaw. He supposed that once Moony had grown to love her as much as him, it made him love her even more so. It was nice to have his wolf side and human side agreed on something for once. He wondered what on earth he had done to deserve her. Her eyes fluttered open and he smiled. "Good morning." She kissed his cheek. "Morning, Moony. Let's have breakfast, I'm starving." He laughed and followed her as she slipped on some slippers and fled downstairs to the kitchen. His morning soon got better. Since she would be leaving when Christmas came, she made the breakfast they ate every holiday. Homemade double chocolate chip pancakes with Nutella spread and strawberries. It was no secret that he loved chocolate. Anna did too, though he definitely loved it more. She always took advantage of her husband's strange addiction when she cooked, though she only made this breakfast on special occasions. If they ate it all the time, it wouldn't be very healthy. Later, after putting on their winter clothes, they decided to go for a walk in the snow-covered forest down the trail they used when Remus had his transformations. They laughed and talked for about half an hour before Anna had an idea. She let her husband go a little ahead of her while she gathered snow in her hands and formed it into a ball. But when she turned it around to throw it, Remus had already thrown one at her face. She laughed and threw her own snowball. It became a war. Balls of snow flew at a non-stop pace. Anna could barely see her target anymore until the snow hitting her suddenly stopped. She stopped throwing and looked around for him, only to be tackled by him and pinned to the ground. He grinned down at her. "I win!" She smirked and pulled him down into a kiss. He loosened his grip, giving her the chance to flip them over. She grinned triumphantly. "I win!" The werewolf glared playfully. "That was a dirty trick!" She glared back. "So was tackling me!" He grinned cheekily and shrugged. "What do you expect? I'm a marauder." She rolled off of him, and he helped her up. He saw her shiver because her clothes were soaked from melted snow. He out his arm around her, and they began walking back to the house. After downing a cup of hot chocolate and changing clothes, Anna was warm again. After the walk and the snowball fight, they were both pretty tired, so they just snuggled onto the couch. As her head rested on Remus's shoulder, Anna thought about everything that has been going on at Hogwarts. She was worried constantly. The creature really did scare her. It was the type of horror story some of the 7th years, usually Slytherins, would tell the younger Muggle-borns to scare them. A monster going around and picking off the weak. She was scared for the students. Who would be next? Hermione? Sophia? Herself? She couldn't bear the thought of her being helpless in bed while everyone else was worried and suffering. Poor Moony would probably tear apart the forest, and himself in the process, searching for his lost mate if he had to bear the full moon alone, not knowing she was going to be okay. She wondered if the beast would resort to killing. It would destroy so many people. She thought about poor Harry, who had already lost his parent to Voldemort and has no memory of his godfather. Losing his only loving relative would kill any innocence left in the poor kid. If she died, she would fail him. She shook the thought away, knowing she was jumping to conclusions. No one had died yet. After dinner, just before bed, they decided to exchange gifts, since Anna would not be there for Christmas. Remus brought out a rectangular from under the Christmas tree and handed it to Anna with a smile. She wasted no time ripping open the package and gasped when she did. It was a red book, bound in red leather with golden bordering and writing on the cover. It was titled Dragons and Magical Creatures of China. She collected all of the books in the series ever since she was given the one in Australia, but she could never find the one from China. It was more than just a book to her. She had been searching for it for ages. It had a picture of a Chinese fireball on the first page, and she flipped through the pages quickly, taking in all of the beautiful illustrations. She smiled when she saw the image of a phoenix. Phoenixes were actually native to China, though they may be found in other countries. She pulled her husband by the collar into a short but sweet kiss. "Thank you so much. I love it. Now mine." She brought her gift over to him. He ripped off the paper to find a medium-sized cardboard box. Inside was a box of chocolates in his favorite branch, and a smaller red box similar to what Anna's engagement ring had been in, put a little bigger. He furrowed his brow in confusion and opened the box and smiled. It was a gold pocket watch. The front had the design of a fox and wolf sitting side by side, their tails entwined. The back was shiny and polished, but free of any design. All it had was the inscription, "I will always love you, Anna." He looked up at her questingly, and she smiled sadly. "I know what you think about yourself. You think you're a monster, and ever since the day we got together, you worried that one day I would wake up and realize that and break your heart. That's why you were so worried about Lockhart. You're scared you'll lose me. You think that just because of one flaw, that you don't deserve me and that you aren't good enough. This watch is to remind you that you are the man I am in love with, and nothing will ever change that. I love you more than life itself, and I will never stop loving you. I'm sorry, I know the words may seem a bit cheesy, but—" The redhead didn't even get to finish her sentence before his lips met hers. He pulled away and looked her in the eye. "Don't dare apologize, Anna Rose Lupin. Not for this. This is the best gift I've ever received." She returned his smile and snuggled into his chest, watching the flames in the fireplace crackle until her eyes began to droop. She mumbled a "Good night, Moony," before drifting off. Remus kissed her head. "Sweet dreams, Red." He closed his eyes and let sleep take him, feeling happier than he had ever been. The next morning, Anna had to leave for Hogwarts, as she had promised Harry. She decided to take Molly's gift for her to Hogwarts to open. She shrunk all of her presents and put them in a satchel before finally deciding it was time to go. She put on a red winter cloak with white fake fur trim, which looked a lot like Father Christmas's suit, and the rest of her winter gear. Remus lead her out on the porch to say goodbye, which is coincidentally where he'd hung the mistletoe that morning. Needless to say, there had been some goodbye snogging before her departure. She hugged him one more time before finally apparating and riding her broom back to Hogwarts. Getting into the Gryffindor common room wasn't as hard as you'd think it'd be. The password had been Quiddicth. She rolled her eyes at that. Sometimes her house was a bit too predictable. She managed to arrive before the students woke. The witch took out her wand, and by the time the kids came downstairs, there were some minor changes to the common room. There was a Christmas tree in the center that was completely decked out in Gryffindor colors, complete with a lion tree topper. There was a wreath on the back of the door, on the side without the fat lady on it. The wreath even had scarlet and gold ribbons weaved into it. Christmas lights were hung all around the room. The presents she had brought sat proudly under the tree by the ones that had already been there when she had arrived. There was even a small table with mugs of hot chocolate, cider, eggnog, and cookies. She'd created Europe's very own Gryffindor Christmas party. The second she had finished, she heard a couple pairs of feet jogging down the stairs. Ron had been the first downstairs. The second year gaped, "Harry, I bloody love your aunt!" Harry's sleepy head perked up at the mention of Anna and hurried down the stairs to see what his best friend was on about and grinned. Christmas at the Dursleys had always been less than pleasant, so this was like a dream come true for the 12-year-old wizard. He tackled Anna in a bear hug. The others weren't too far behind them. George, Fred, Ginny, and Hermione came down to join in on the festivities. Anna had given Hermione a potion to conceal her cat-like appearance. Even though it didn't cure it, it allowed the girl to join her friends. Everyone sat around the tree and gave out presents. Anna gave hers out first. Anna got Hermione a potted plant with several flowers blooming from it. The flowers themselves looked almost exactly like a rue flower, except each petal was pure white with a hint of a silvery shimmer, and the centers were a rainbow of different colors from yellow to green to red to periwinkle. "They're called Aurelia Rues," explained Anna. "They glow slightly in the dark, so they are good for reading or homework, but they aren't too bright, so they won't disturb your roommates. The aroma from this sweet-smelling flower relieves headaches and helps the brain's thought process. It's good for when you have writer's block. I used to have a friend who used it for homework and studying." Hermione grinned and thanked her. She turned to Ginny and handed her a blue gift bag. The youngest witch gasped and gently pulled her present out of the bag. It was a small holding fan that opened up into clamshell-like shape and was made of turquoise silk decorated with a beautiful underwater scene. The handle was made of laurel wood. Anna quickly gave the backstory behind it. "Years ago I went to Greece, strictly on aura business, when I came across a young Nereid caught in some sort of net. I helped her and she gave me 2 beautiful fans that she said she crafted herself. My favorite was the red one, which is at my house. For years I haven't known what to do with this one. I've decided to give it to you because you remind me of her. Do you like it?" Ginny was shocked. She hadn't known Anna for very long and didn't really think she'd get such a gift, and her family didn't have enough money to give her much in return. Nothing as wonderful as this, but she had a feeling Anna didn't want their money. "I love it. It's so beautiful. Thank you." Anna smiled. She had wanted to do something nice for Ginny. The youngest Weasley was having a rough first year and needed some cheering up. They hugged, and Anna moved on to the next person. Fred and George's gifts were simple enough, just a bunch of pranking supplies and candy, along with a note that said for them to feel free to prank Lockhart. Anna told Ron that she would take him to Ollivander's next year and get him his own wand, which was good enough for him. Finally, it was Harry's turn. She told everyone else to open up their other presents while she took Harry into an empty dorm to give him his gift. It was special. Harry was confused. Why couldn't he be given his gift in the common room? Anna sat down on one of the beds and patted the spot next to her, signaling him to sit. She took out a small red box from her satchel and passed it Harry, wordlessly. Harry opened it and smiled. It was a gold-chained amulet with an iridescent ruby. The crystal's shape reminded him distinctly of an egg, and it was around the size of a walnut. It was simple, but elegant in design and was gender-neutral. His smile faded when he looked up at his aunt. "I can't accept this. It must have cost you a fortune, and I don't have anything to give you." Anna cut him off gently. It was your father's, Harry. He'd want you to have. It's an old Potter family heirloom. It was given to me for safekeeping. But I'm not a Potter, Harry. It doesn't belong to me. Besides, Ruby is your birthstone. You don't need to give me anything, Harry. I just want to be a good aunt for your sake and your parents." Harry grinned and put the amulet on. Anna blinked back tears and hugged him. Harry frowned and patted her back. What's wrong? Had he done something that hurt her? She shook his head with a small smile. Nothing. It's just that you have no idea how much it means to me that you are alive. I never thought I would have any family after Lily died. Harry looked up at her. But you have a husband. You could have kids of your own. Her smile turned sad, and she brushed the hair out of his eyes in a motherly fashion. Harry, when I was younger, I had an accident. It was the Quidditch Championship and we were winning. I was a chaser, one of the best, actually, and I was about to score for the team when one of the Slytherin beaters, Lucius Malfoy, accidentally hit me with his bat. The blow itself hadn't hurt that much, but it knocked me right off my broom. I was badly injured, Harry. The bones were an easy fix, but I found out many years later that I can't have kids. Harry froze and he was shocked. His aunt would have made the most brilliant mum ever. He would have had a cousin, a good one. His hands turned to fists. It was all Malfoy's fault. It made his blood boil, but he swallowed his anger and gave his aunt a fierce hug. I'm sorry. She let out a musical laugh. Oh, Harry, you've got nothing to apologize for. You've given me the best present I have ever been given in my life. He tilted his head in confusion. What? She grinned and kissed his forehead. A chance to finally feel like a mother. He beamed and hugged her once more before they both headed back to the group. The rest of Anna's Christmas was not disappointing. She got several gifts. The gift from the Weasleys was the gift Molly had given her. It was a box with her own turquoise Weasley jumper with the initial A in gold. She grinned proudly as she put it on over the dark, red, long-sleeved shirt she had put on under her cloak that she had previously taken off. Her box was also filled with sweets and a few other little things. She made a mental note to write a thank you letter to Molly and Arthur. She didn't expect much from the kids. They didn't have much money, and they couldn't have exactly gone to the store while they were at Hogwarts. Hermione gave her a copy of a Muggle book she had brought with her. Anna had smiled and told her she'd read it later. After a while, Anna said goodbye and headed to her room, remembering Avalon had not yet been let out of her cage. But when she got to the hall wing, the teacher slept. She nearly ran into her favorite Slytherin. Happy Christmas, Sev. He smirked. Bah humbug. She had told him about few Muggle books and movies, including Muggle Christmas classics. She laughed, and he asked her to come to his room. She raised an eyebrow. She'd never been in his quarters before. He was a very private person, and she respected that, but that didn't stop her from jumping at the chance to see it. All of the teacher dorms were very apartment-like. They all had a bedroom, small kitchen, a bathroom, and a small living room. Nothing incredibly extravagant, though they could be decorated however the professor pleased. Professor Snape's dorm was nothing incredibly surprising. The painting that guarded his door was a snake. His password was not something incredibly personal like Lily. If someone were to enter them with him, that would give away information, so he had went with Fang. Anna was pretty sure he had just opened up his potion ingredient dictionary at a random page and picked a random ingredient. The relation to snakes was nothing but a happy accident. The insides were as gloomy as expected, but it was surprisingly neat. He had never been very messy or sloppy, but she had assumed it would have piles of potions, books, and papers everywhere, and ingredients and potions, but everything was placed on his black shelves. The walls were made of the same stone as his classroom wall for the most part. The bedroom door was opened, and Anna could see green-painted walls with black trim. The curtains and duvet were green, and the pillows and rug with silver. The Slytherin crest hung proudly over the bed, and he had black dressers and a black desk with a few random little mementos and trinkets. The living room was little more than a green rug placed in the middle of a room with an assortment of 3 or 4 green or black chairs. Anna plopped into one, and he went to get something from a shelf behind her and came back with a tall green wrapped box with a red ribbon. She smiled gratefully and took it wordlessly, heading his warning that the contents were fragile. She pulled the ribbon and opened the cardboard box and gasped. When they were children at Hogwarts and went to look at all the wizarding shops, She could never afford much more than a small souvenir or some candy or a book. She remembered every day she would gaze longingly into the wizard's antique shop at the cute little porcelain dolls. Normally, she wouldn't have been interested, but these were not any ordinary dolls. Each doll represented a Hogwarts house. Anna's favorite had long, wavy red hair in one neat, intricate braid down the side and freckles that dotted her cheeks. Her eyes were green and daring. Her lips, unlike the other dolls who had a simple, neutral smile, had a very slight smirk to it. Her expression did not read as evil, but mischief. She surprisingly had red dress with a short layered skirt with an empire waist and a gold belt and a gold chain around her neck. She had a matching red cloak. It was the Gryffindor doll. Anna had always wanted the Gryffindor doll because it looked so much like her. But she could never afford it, and by the time she could, the store no longer sold them. She gently picked up the doll and grinned. It was so delicate, and it brought back so many memories. She looked up at her friend, touched. "You remembered?" He shrugged. "How could I forget? You dragged me there every time we went to Diagon Alley just to stare at them. I found someone who sold them, and I could pass the opportunity." She hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Sev." He nodded and she beamed, somewhat mischievously. "I can't wait to give you my gift. I can't pick it up until tomorrow." He rolled his eyes. "I know that look, Anna. What did you get me? A Gryffindor poster?" She laughed. "No." He raised an eyebrow and glared playfully. "If you're lying, I'm taking back the doll." She hugged it to her chest protectively. "You certainly will not, unless you want to loose a hand." He sighed. "Well, what did you get me?" She wagged a finger at him as she stood up. "Tisk tisk, Sev. It wouldn't be a surprise if I told you. You'll just have to wait. Bye-bye." She walked away with the doll cradled in her arms and headed to her room. She put the doll on its stand and on the shelf. "Let's see. I'll name you Lily." The next day. The next morning, Anna got up early to go to Diagon Alley and pick up her friend's present. After stopping to buy a few extra things, she put in a box and quickly brought it to him. He opened the lid and groaned. "You are joking." Severus picked up the creature by the scruff and arched an eyebrow. "You thought I would like a kitten." She shrugged. "I think you get lonely sometimes. I don't think you'll admit to liking it, but I think you'll learn to love him if you just gave him a chance. Put him down, let him explore." The Slytherin sighed and rested the cat on his desk, and for the first time really looked at it. It was black with bright green eyes. Anna had taken the liberty to buy him a green color with a silver disc hanging from the front that only had Severus's name on the back but nothing on the front. The professor sighed. "I suppose we should name the thing if I'm going to keep it." And so the naming game began. "Anna, how about Gus?" Sev. "No, how about Tybalt?" Anna. "The guy that got killed in Romeo and Juliet." "No way, this kitten is so sweet." Castiel. Sev. "No, Ash?" Anna. Nah, I like Jasper." Sev. "No." They both paused for a good while, just looking at the kitten as it played with a pen from the desk, attacking it as if it were his prey. Anna suddenly looked at her friend. "How about Loki?" Severus's eyes lit up. "Interesting. The god of mischief in Norse mythology. Fine. His name will be Loki." Anna grinned and with a flash of her wand engraved the silver plate in the kitten's collar with a single word. "Loki." She picked up the kitten and cooed. "He's so cute, Sev." The man rolled his eyes. "Now, I have to buy litter and food and toys." Anna shook her head. "I got you the self-leaning litter box. All mess gets poofed away. I got a couple toys and a few bags of cat food to get you started. Now I think I'm going to leave you two to bond for a while, Toodles." She heard him shout his protest the whole way to the door and she giggled. It really was a wonder how he hit up with her. Anna stopped by the headmaster's office and smirked. "Did you get my present?" He chuckled. "I did. I suppose Harry told you about the socks." She grinned. "Yeah." Albus smiled gently. "You know you've done wonders for that boy." Anna shook her head. "He's done more for me." Albus laughed a little. "You're so modest sometimes, my dear. It is astonishing, but I mean it. That boy was so shy when I first saw him and so unsure of himself, and he still is. But you have helped him so much." The witch scowled. "Well, if you had told me in his first year..." The headmaster sighed. "Yes, that I almost regret." Anna glared. "Almost?" He remained calm. Harry was already dealing with the finding out he was a wizard and Voldemort. I didn't want to pile too much information onto the poor boy. Anna calmed herself. Perhaps you're right. Maybe it was destiny that I found out about him when I did. Albums nodded and changed the subject. But enough about the past. How's Severus? Anna grinned. I gave him a kitten for Christmas. The headmaster laughed. Anna, I did miss your sense of humor. How is he taking it? She smirked. He's trying to hate it, but I think he likes it. He needs it. Albums nodded. Quite right. She got up. I better go. Lemon drop. She smiled. You know me well enough to know that I almost never refuse a lemon drop. Anna hadn't visited Hagrid's hut for a while, so she figured a visit was due. She knocked on the door and it flung open. Hello, Anna. Come in. Come in. I was just trying out that brownie recipe you gave me. We can talk while they bake. Then we can eat. She grinned and sat down in the hut. Thanks. Hagrid grinned with a mischievous gleam in his eye. So you captured the heart of Remus Lupin, eh? I knew it. Really, I did. I remember seeing you studying together outside by a tree one day and thinking, those two are a match made in heaven. And now look at you. She laughed. I'm glad you approve. After Hagrid's, she made one last stop for the day in the Gryffindor common room. When she walked in, she found Harry and Ron playing wizard's chess. She grinned. Hello, boys. They smiled. Hey, Anna. She sat down on the couch. Listen, I didn't come here for a social call this time. I have a serious question to ask you. They sobered, and Harry gulped. What do you mean? What were you three doing with Polyjuice Potion, and you can't deny it? Only one thing would have caused what happened to Hermione. I'm not mad. I've broken plenty of rules in the past, but why? It wasn't for a prank. Ron was surprisingly the one to answer. We thought Draco had something to do with the Chamber of Secrets. We thought that he was blaming it on Hardy because he hated him. Plus, he's a muggle-born hating Slytherin bully. She sighed. Yes, Draco is the spitting image of his father in looks and personality, but even Lucius Malfoy wasn't going around and paralyzing muggle-borns and threatening people with messages written in blood at 12 years old. Lucius and Draco are the type of cowards that don't like getting their hands dirty. Draco has Crabbe and Goyle to do any of his physical bullying, and even if he was doing it, do you have any idea how dangerous that is? Sneaking around at night while someone or something is picking off kids one by one? I know you aren't muggle-borns, but that doesn't mean you aren't enemies of the heir. We don't know who the heir is. I snuck around all the time at night when I was young, but I didn't have to worry about being petrified. She sighed when she saw their guilty looks. Look, I admire your bravery, really. You've done outstanding detective work. You two would make great auras, but could you try not to give me a bloody heart attack? They nodded and she smiled. Good now, Ron. I've heard you're quite the master wizard's chest. Mind if I test your skills with my own? Ron grinned. You're on. After a long match, they finally had a winner. Ron Weasley became the second wizard ever to beat Anna at chess. Anna was walking through the courtyard about a week later. Since everyone was still on holiday, it was empty, not to mention the fact that it was fairly early in the morning and most people slept in when there weren't any classes. She had been on patrol. Normally, there were other teachers keeping watch, but the holidays caused an unexpected shortage of teachers available for such a task. She wasn't even remotely prepared for what happened next. She turned abruptly when she heard two young, familiar voices arguing. They appeared to have fallen on the grass, and the boy stood up, brushing the dirt off of him. Anna's eyes widened. Harry, what are you... But when she went to get a closer look, she found it wasn't Harry and Ginny in the field. The boy turned and his jaw dropped. Anna, you look so... Pretty, the younger girl offered with a smirk. He grumbled and turned to her. I was going to say different. They stopped arguing with. They heard a snivel and a choked laugh. J.J. James? Lily? James frowned and nodded. What's wrong? Why are you crying? Anna shook her head with a smile and laughed again. Nothing. I'm just happy to see you. Merlin, you two are so young. Lily smiled before tilting her head in curiosity. Anna, who's Harry? The older witch's gaze snapped over to her in an instant, and her eyes went wide like two giant lily pads. What? The younger Gryffindor's expression twisted into puzzlement. You called James. Harry. Anna waved her off before fixing each of her siblings with a look that she had seen on her mother and Molly just about 1,000 times. That's not important. What's important is, what the bloody hell are you two doing here? Who knows what you could alter? What if someone else saw you? You have to go back. James put a finger in his ear, making a face at how loud she was, muttering to Lily, "Blimey, she could knock out a harpy with that screech. Future Anna's bossier than you." This earned him 2 smacks on the back if the head from each of the red-headed twins, not Fred and George. Anna rolled her eyes. "Jamesy boy, I love you like a brother, but you can be an absolute twat at times. Seriously, how did you guys even get here?" Lily glared at the raven-haired boy. "Potter tried to steal, James. I wouldn't really say I stole it. I borrowed it without permission. My time turner that was given to me for my classes." James cut in again. "To be fair, I only did it because Anna was going nuts with worry about you. Remus told me to talk to you." Lily fumed. "But you didn't have to try and snatch it away. You messed it up and sent us like 20 years into the future." Anna's eyes lit up with recognition. "Oh, that's what happened. You guys both disappeared for hours in our second year and then tried to sneak back into your dorms, but—" Lily shook her head frantically. "No, you can't tell us what happens." Lily looked at James. "We should go back anyways." Anna looked away, and sadness filled her heart. Her eyes were downcast, and she crossed her arms, afraid that her hands might begin shake in fear of feeling their loss again. "Yeah, you should," the professor said softly. She had been so happy to see them again after all of those years that she had forgotten that they would have to leave, and she couldn't even tell them that this was the last time she would ever get to see them. James looked up at her, concern filling his eyes. "Anna, what's wrong?" The female marauder just shook her head and smiled a little. "Nothing, just be careful, okay? And don't tell past me that we met." Lily nodded and shot her a soft, reassuring smile. "Don't worry, I won't let Potter go blabbering off to Sirius." She held up the time turner and put it around their necks. She reached for the charm, but faltered and looked at her sister. "Anna, I don't know what you aren't telling us or why you were so happy when you saw us, but just know that you are strong and you can always count on the people closest to you for support." Anna nodded and wiped her tears away, even though the words made her want to cry all over again. "Thanks, Lil." And just like that, they were gone. After they left, Anna didn't cry. She just sighed sadly. It was hard seeing them bickering like old married couple again, but instead of curling up in a ball and weeping, she walked back to get breakfast, knowing it was already being set up and the kids would be waking up soon. Later that day, Anna found Harry in the empty common room, inspecting the stone on his father's necklace. He let it fall to his chest when his aunt came in. He smiled at her, and she half-heartedly returned it, causing him to frown. "What's wrong? Did someone else get petrified, or—" Anna cut him off quickly. "No, nothing like that. I just thought you might want to talk about your parents a little more. I haven't told you anything since we looked at those pictures I showed you." He nodded eagerly, and the witch plopped down on the couch. "When your parents first met, Lily thought he was a stuck-up, annoying troublemaker and hated him. James, however, had a crush in her and didn't mind shouting it to the whole world. He started flirting with her in first year. They bickered a lot, and after a while Lily found herself falling in love with him. As for likes and dislikes, James loved Quidditch. He was a chaser, and he had a knack for pranking people. He could be a bit annoying at times, but he had a good heart, and he was fiercely protective. Both he and your mother were pretty popular. Sometimes he could be a little egotistical, but he was funny and was a natural-born leader." Harry nodded, absorbing every word and drinking in every detail. His aunt continued. "Lily was smart, sharp as a tack, but kind and tried her hardest to do what was right and stick to rules. She was head girl, and Albus couldn't help but play Cupid and made James head boy so they would spend more time together. She liked reading and made O's in everything. One of her greatest qualities, though, was her bravery. That girl was very headstrong and was always prepared to stick up for the weaker man. She hated Lucius Malfoy more than anyone because of how much he and his gang would terrorize the first years. That was part of the reason James liked her and she fell in love with him. They both couldn't stand by and watch someone being bullied. None of the marauders did. Lil's was a bit on the girly side. If there was ever a special event or dance, she loved to dress up and give people makeovers. She liked flowers and gardening. She always loved wind chimes too. I gave her some for her birthday one year, and she loved sitting on the stairs at the front of our house early in the morning and listened to them as she sipped her tea. We were incredibly close. The only time we were separated was when I left home to live with James. Lily was always very kind and gentle, and she always felt sorry for Petunia. I hated the way Petunia treated us, and I couldn't stay in a house where I was discriminated against for magic I couldn't even use at home yet. So I ran to James one dark stormy night, and his parents took me in. Anna wiped her tears away and continued, brushing off Harry's concern. Her favorite animal was an elephant. James's was a lion. There never was a man with more Gryffindor pride than James Potter. His favorite colors was red too, but Lily really loved lavender. She was very modest, just like you. She always said I was the pretty one, but I always thought she was much prettier than me. One of her favorite things to do was talk, though. She could talk about anything. One time, when we couldn't sleep during the summer because of a huge thunderstorm, she talked to me the entire night about how loud it was. Harry chuckled with a smile. She sounds wonderful. They both sound brilliant. I wish I could have met them. Anna's eyes widened. Oh, Harry, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have mentioned it. He didn't let her finish and looked at her with an almost amused expression. Anna, I'm glad you told me. No one else will spare a word about my parents. Afraid they'll hurt me. Thank you, really. I know it must be hard talking about them. She nodded. Yeah, but you need to know these things. Don't ever let anyone tell you your parents were lazy or evil or crazy or stupid or weak. I don't want you to ever doubt that they were great people. I want you to know for sure the next time Petunia tries to insult our family that she is lying. The wizard shook his head. I never believed her anyways. You know, she only mentioned you a couple times. I don't think she wanted me to know I had another aunt. Most of the time she said your names was when I wasn't in the room, or thought I couldn't hear her, or when she was really angry. I always just brushed it off. I couldn't ask. They didn't like it when I asked questions. Anna glared and rolled her eyes. I can't believe how terrible she is. That woman never deserved Lily's kindness. I met her husband too. They were high school sweethearts. They hated us. Vernon's sister Marge was the most vile person I ever met, always sticking her nose up and huffing when she saw me or Lils. One time, Lily had to hold me back because she started picking on Severus. I broke free though and punched her right in face. Twice. Harry laughed out loud. I can't believe you did that. I hate her too. Anna grinned. She got a black eye, a split lip, and broken nose. By that year, I had come to realize I was tired of being insulted and not doing anything about it. Not that you should use violence to solve your problems. Oh, and I'm going to have a little talk with the Dursleys. If you so much as have a paper cut when I see you in your 3rd year, I'm going after them. The boy who lived beamed. You'd really do that? She ruffled his hair. Course. It's what family is for. Now come on, it's almost feast time, and if I don't get there early, Hagrid will have already eaten all of the roast chicken. Anna was disappointed when the students finally returned to Hogwarts from holiday. With the Gryffindor common room empty, except for Harry and the Weasleys, it had been fun. They played loud games of exploding snap and had duels, and even set up a few pranks for some of the students and teachers for when they returned. Anna couldn't wait to see Lockhart's reaction. It had been easy to forget that the entire school thought Harry was evil. Many noticed that Hermione was not with her friends like usual and started a nasty rumor that Harry had petrified, much to the red-headed professor's disgust. The rumor led to a lot of students going up to the hospital wing to see her. Poor Hermione was still a cat and was completely humiliated. Poppy took pity and drew back the curtain on her bed so no one would see her. The nurse even forbid students from coming in without a good reason. She had given a proper scolding to Draco Malfoy, which had cheered up the young Gryffindor witch. Some of the kids who believed the rumors saying Hermione had been petrified had warned Anna in fear that she should be careful around Harry. Honestly, she appreciated their concern, but she was none too happy with people telling her nephew was an evil heir to Slytherin, and that she should stay away from him at all cost. The one good thing about that week was seeing how attached Severus was becoming with his new kitten. She had stopped by his classroom to find him making a potion with Loki sitting next to the cauldron, watching him work. Every once in a while he would scratch the cat's head and it would purr softly. She had decided not to disturb them. When the Slytherin wasn't working, the kitten would usually follow him around like a shadow. Anna could have sworn she'd seen Filch send a few jealous looks in his direction. After finding out Harry, Ron, and Hermione were investigating the petrifications, Anna decided to some detective work of her own, and she knew that the best people to go to about these sort of things were ghosts. Ghosts don't sleep too much, and they always have ways of overhearing certain things. Usually she would go to Sir Nicholas, but since he had already fallen victim to the air, she only had one option: moaning Myrtle. The fox honestly had nothing against the young ghost. She actually felt kind of bad for the poor girl who died at such a tender age. As a young Hogwarts girl, she had actually kept her company from time to time. Maybe now was the time for another visit. So she left dinner early and snuck her way to the girls' bathroom and called out, "Myrtle, I haven't seen you since 7th year and decided to drop by and say hello." She waited a few seconds, afraid that the poltergeist wouldn't appear, but then a head peeked from behind a stall and Myrtle grinned. "Annie, dearest, I haven't seen you since that know-it-all Gryffindor girl got a hairball." Anna returned her smile. "Hello, Myrtle. I heard you've met my nephew, Harry." The ghost girl, if possible, blushed. "Yes, he's quite handsome too." Anna smirked. "Well, if he dies, you have my permission to go after him." Myrtle shot the witch a sly smile. "I knew there was a reason I liked you." Anna nodded and sat on a dry spot on the floor. "Now, Myrtle, I've been a bit behind on gossip. What's happened?" The former Ravenclaw thought for a moment. Let's see. Nothing much has happened over the holidays, except that handsome Potter boy came in again a day or two ago. I had been crying at the time because some bully threw a book at me. I didn't see who it was, but Harry took the book. I think it may have been a journal of some sort. His ginger friend warned him against it, but he dismissed it. Oh, and I've seen that Weasley girl in here a couple times crying. I ignored her most of the time. I know when a girl needs her privacy. That's all that I know that's recent." Anna thanked the girl and bid her farewell. She decided she would have to keep an eye out for this journal. The air had been very quiet lately, which put her on edge because she knew this ordeal was far from over. She had heard many different theories. Some thought he or she was afraid of getting caught with more teachers taking watch. Ernie still talked loudly about how it was probably because Harry had already been found out at the dueling club. Gilderoy Lockhart had bragged to her that the Slytherin was afraid of him. She smirked, knowing that when he woke up the next morning, he would have bright green hair. She had a feeling that he would actually enjoy pink hair. Then, maybe he would be a little more humble from embarrassment. One could only hope. By February 14th, not only had she not found the book, but she had a bigger problem. In an attempt to get the school into good spirits, the idiot had arranged a Valentine's Day feast with several pink and red decorations. He wore bright pink robes and had somehow managed to get the dye out of his hair after a couple days. His brilliant idea was to have a bunch of dwarves deliver musical lovergrams. Anna and Severus rolled their eyes. That wasn't the end of her Valentine's Day curse, though. At the lunch feast, her Slytherin friend had snatched her goblet out of her hand. It had turned out that Lockhart had dared to put a love potion in her drink. There was no proof that it was him, but the disappointed look he had on his face gave it away. She let it go, deciding she should get the Weasley twins to take care of it. But her dark-haired best friend was hearing none of it. He dragged her all the way to Dumbledore's office after lunch, demanding that the defense against the dark arts teacher be fired. Albus had reluctantly replied that he could not fire or even suspend the professor without clear proof. She had simply shrugged, but her friend had stalked off into his potions classroom. Later, she found that she wasn't the only one who had a curse. Turned out someone sent Harry one of Lockhart's dwarves. It had been one gigantic mess. Percy Weasley had been furious. Malfoy had tried to take a book from Harry, but it was in her hand with a flick of her wand. It got worse when Draco revealed that it was Ginny who had sent the dwarf. Ginny ran into the classroom covering her face. Ron angrily took out his wand, but Harry pulled him away. She went to Ginny and wrote her a pass to save her from embarrassment. The redhead hugged her and went to the bathroom to calm down. Dinner was the highlight of her day. When she sat down in her usual seat next to Severus, she saw her mischievous twinkle in his eye and didn't even bother asking what he was up to. When Gilderoy first took a sip from his goblet, nothing happened. Then a large belch came from his lips. In addition, his skin turned dark green and his hair bright red, which didn't match his pink robes at all. Another belch exploded from his mouth, and he excused himself to the restroom. Anna couldn't help it. She laughed. She laughed and laughed until she couldn't breathe. If it had been anyone else, she should have felt bad, but Lockhart had deserved it. The next day, Anna decided to spend a day in the library and see what she could find out about the chamber. She was a teacher, so she had access to the restricted section. The library was almost completely empty. Even the librarian, Madame Pince, was nowhere to be seen. She was just about to settle into one of the chairs and start researching when she heard something strange. There was a low rusting of movement and a sharp hissing sound. The professor followed the noise. A shot of fear echoed throughout her bones, and she clutched her gold fox locket, glancing down at the smooth, shiny surface. But instead of seeing her own reflection in the gold, she saw a pair of glowing yellow snake eyes. She screamed and felt her limbs lock and her muscles go numb. She dropped to the floor and didn't even have the ability to yelp in pain from the impact. Her eyes began to droop and she felt cold. Just before her vision went dark, she heard another scream. Hermione. She'd failed to protect her. Where was she? Harry was on the Quidditch field getting ready for the match. But there was one problem. His aunt wasn't there. She never missed a game, especially not after he fell off his broom. She told him once that she wanted to always be there to catch him. But she wasn't. Something was wrong. He could feel it. Maybe it's just nerves, he thought. He clutched his father's necklace, a nervous habit he had started ever since Christmas Day. It made him feel safer, as if his father was watching over him and protecting him when he wore it. He had just finished reassuring himself that his aunt was just running late, when Minerva McGonagall ran onto the pitch with a giant purple megaphone. "Attention students and faculty! The match is cancelled!" Everyone in the stands groaned in unison. Oliver Wood ran to her and shouted his protest, but his words faded when he saw tears in her eyes. Something was definitely wrong. The head of the Gryffindor house continued, "All students are to make their way back to the house common rooms, where the heads of houses will give them further instructions." She lowered the megaphones and beckoned Harry to her. The young wizard was confused. Normally his aunt would be rounding up the Gryffindors and bringing them to the common room, or running down to ask the professor what was going on. Minerva looked at him with pity. "Potter, I think you'd best come with me." He felt anger boil inside him. Surely they couldn't honestly still think him a suspect. He was on the field. Everyone could see him. His anger deflated when she asked Ron to come too. He was confused now. Why would they need Ron? Their professor led them up the marble steps, but they weren't led to Dumbledore's office. They were led to the infirmary. The cat-like woman turned to them. "This will come as a bit of a shock. There has been another attack. Another double attack." Harry froze when he saw who was on the bed. The cot was across the room, but he could see his aunt's curly red hair a mile away. He couldn't breathe. He ran to her bed and fell to his knees with tears in his eyes as he drank in the sight of his aunt's pale face with an expression of fear he had rarely seen her have. Ron looked at the teacher coldly. "Now, do you guys still think he's a suspect?" Minerva shook her head sadly. "No, Mr. Weasley. For what it's worth, I knew Harry would never do something so horrible." Ron gasped when he saw the bed next to Anna. "Harry, Hermione is here too." Harry couldn't believe it. It was like some terrible dream. It was his worst fear realized. The professor coughed. "I'll take you two back to your common room. I need to address the students in any case." Harry squeezed his aunt's ice-cold hands and whispered, "I'll stop this, I promise." With Snape, it was his fault. He should have been watching out for his best friend. He was such a fool to believe that the heir would leave Anna alone. He should be in the Slytherin common room lecturing his students to stay out of the halls. That would be useless, though. None of the Slytherins would be attacked, that much was obvious. He sighed from where he sat in the infirmary. He knew what he had to do. He knew what Anna would want him to do. He picked up a quill and parchment and sat down to write a letter. With Remus. Remus had just come home from the store. Most of what he bought was for Anna's next visit. His wife really had a talent for cooking. He smiled dreamily. She was great at everything, really, in his eyes anyways. And anything she was bad at wasn't good enough for her to master. He didn't even have time to put up the groceries when there was a tapping on the window. He turned to see a raven with a message tied to it. Remus opened the window and frowned as he read the unsigned message. Red was petrified? All of the sudden, he forgot the groceries and every other thought. He felt a hole burrow itself in his chest and an emptiness settle in his bones. Without a moment to loose, he snapped out of his trance, grabbed his brown cloak, and apparated. He just hoped she would be all right, with Harry. Even as Harry listened to McGonagall's speech in the common room, all he could think was that he needed to stop Hagrid's pet before it was too late. Tom Riddle's diary had shown that Hagrid had let the monster loose with good intentions in the past. He didn't know the why it was happening now, but he knew he had to stop it, for Anna. As soon as the head of the house left, he got Ron and his father's cloak and left. On the way down, they passed the infirmary but stopped when they saw an unfamiliar man in brown by his aunt's side. For a moment, Harry forgot what he was doing and walked into the room to watch him from under his cloak. The stranger clutched his aunt's hand like it was a lifeline. He had tears in his eyes, like seeing her so vulnerable was just too painful for his heart. Harry couldn't blame him. It was painful. Unlike someone in a coma, someone petrified was frozen in the potion they were when they were petrified. Anna had been found on her side staring at a petrified Hermione in devastation at having failed the poor young girl who had idolized the older witch. The heartbroken look in her green eyes was enough to bring him to tears. Suddenly, the man in brown spoke without even looking back. "I know you're there." Harry froze, and the man chuckled, but it was weary and time-worn. "Come on out. I've been under an invisibility cloak enough times to know when someone else is using it against me, but I have a feeling you mean no harm." Harry glanced at Ron before peeking out of the fabric. The man beamed at him proudly. "You must be James and Lily's boy. I recognize you." The boy who lived sputtered, "Recognize me, sir?" The elder wizard nodded. "I held you in my arms when you were just a newborn." Harry suddenly grinned. "You must be Remus." Remus looked at his wife fondly and kissed the back of her hand. "That I am." Ron looked confused. "Who are you?" He smiled sadly. "I'm her husband." He sighed. "This is all my fault." Harry shook his head. "How would it be your fault?" Remus looked down. "I should have been here, to protect her. This so-called heir is just another bully that hates her just because of her blood status. Me and my friends swore she'd never have to face such people alone again, and yet I let her fall prey to this monster." Harry wanted to comfort him, but Ron grabbed his shoulder. "Harry, we don't have much time. We have to stop this thing." Harry nodded and reluctantly said goodbye, but just before he put on the cloak, he told the werewolf, "Don't blame yourself. If Anna heard you say that, she would have smacked the back of your head." Remus nodded. "Thank you, Harry. Your parents would be proud." Harry nodded. "I hope so, sir." Remus crinkled his nose. "Stop with that sir nonsense. We're family. I'm your other uncle." Harry nodded and disappeared under the cloak. Remus sighed. "That boy is too much like his father for his own good." Minerva walked into the infirmary. "Remus, it's so good to see a familiar face in such terrible times. It's been so stressful with Hermione and Anna being petrified and Cornelius Fudge coming here." Remus scowled at the name. "He's here for Hagrid. That man needs to stop sticking his nose into other people's lives." The professor raised an eyebrow. "Do you have some sort of quarrel with him?" Remus growled. "He hates me. His lot all say that I'm no good for Anna because of what I am. They're probably right too." The older witch gave his a stern look. "You stop those thoughts this instant. You are very good for Anna. I'd hate to see what would have happened to her after Lily and James's death if you hadn't been there. You helped each other. And Cornelius just doesn't understand. If Anna knew what he was saying, he would no doubt loose his tongue. Not that he isn't terrified by that woman already." Remus smirked. "He does always seem to get a little nervous when she starts talking circles around him. It's quite a sight." Minerva nodded in agreement. "What's that old saying? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." Remus's smile turned sad. "I just wish she'd come back to me from this state. It's not natural seeing her so still and helpless. She should be up and fighting like always." Minerva put a comforting hand on his shoulder. "In due time, just you wait. She'll be up and fighting in no time. Let us hope for Cornelius's sake he's gone before then." Remus slept in the hospital wing that night, even though he knew he had other options. He wanted to stay with his fox. Harry had a busy night filled with spiders and secrets. He finally got to see who Cornelius Fudge was, too. That morning, McGonagall announced that Professor Sprout's mandrakes were ready to be made into a cure. Everyone cheered and seemed to think that everything was over now, but Harry knew better. He knew the beast had to be slain. Later, he found something in Hermione's hand that he hadn't seen before, information on a basilisk. Everything was so much clearer now. The basilisk should have killed all the victims at first glance, but they were all either lucky enough or clever enough not to look at it directly. For instance, Anna had seen it in the reflection of her gold locket. Ron and Harry were filled with excitement as they pieced together all the events that has happened and figured out where the Chamber of Secrets might be. Anna shot up from her bed into a sitting position the second she woke up. "Hermione!" She looked around frantically for the girl until she heard a soft voice. "I'm here, Professor, I'm fine." Hermione sat in the bed next to Anna, smiling at her. Anna sighed in relief. "Thank Merlin." Remus hurried into the infirmary. The patients had been given the cure by Poppy hours ago, but it took a while to take effect. Madame Pumphrey had practically shoved Remus out of the hospital wing, exclaiming that if he didn't eat soon, she'd force food down his throat. He grinned when he saw her up, and she got up, much to the nurse's protest, and hugged him tightly. "Remus!" He growled softly in her ear. "What am I going to do with you?" She grabbed his chin and smirked. "How about this?" She pulled him into a deep kiss. It only lasted a few seconds before she pulled away and asked, "Where's Harry?" "Last I heard, he was in Dumbledore's office." She pecked her husband one last time on the lips. "Thanks," before running straight for Albus's office. He shared an exasperated look with Hermione. "One day, that woman will be end of me." Outside the headmaster's office, it appeared Anna had arrived just in time. All she saw was Lucius Malfoy flying backwards. At first she was confused, but when the sock in the elf's hand caught her eye, she knew what had happened. The blonde stood up and brushed off his clothes. He sneered at Anna. "Anna Lupin, I thought you got your mud-blooded self petrified." She glared. "Watch yourself, Lucius, or I'll turn you into the cowardly worm you are." He brought the snake head of his game under her chin. "Oh, Anna, what a brave little ant you are." She smirked, even with the head of the cane tilting her head up slightly. "Thanks." He scowled and snatched the cane away. He stalked away, and she called after him. "And I don't want you coming within 20 feet of my nephew and his friends, or you'll be answering to me." Harry ran to her with a grin on his face. "You're okay." She ruffled his hair. "Of course I am, but look at you. You're filthy. And is that blood? Didn't someone make sure you had medical attention? We're bringing you to Poppy, and then you are having a nice warm bath, and oof!" She was cut off by Harry's bone-crushing hug. "Thank you." She smiled and pulled him gently forward by the arm. "Come on. If you're hurt, I want to make sure you get taken care of." Outside the train, Remus slipped his arm around his wife's waist when they got off the train. He was planning to keep her very close until the fear of what had happened with Voldemort faded. Ron found his family quickly, and with a long round of goodbye hugs, he and the Weasleys were gone. Next was Hermione's parents. Anna smiled kindly at them and made small talk about how absolutely brilliant their daughter was at school and introduced her husband. After the Grangers left, there was only one more goodbye to give. The Dursleys were late by about 20 minutes. They were probably hoping that Anna would have left by then. Petunia looked less than pleased to see her, but Anna just smiled at her sister. "Hi, Tuny. You look good. I'm sure you're eager to get Harry back in your happy home, but I wanted to talk to you three, alone." Remus smirked and nudged Harry as the Dursleys and Anna walked out of earshot. "I wouldn't want to be them." Harry was just about to ask why, when he saw terror entire the Muggle family's eyes. It was clear she was threatening them in some way. After another minute of lecturing, she skipped back to Harry and hugged him tightly. "Hang in there, kid. I'll be there to rescue you as soon as summer's over." He smiled. "I'll be looking forward to it." She kissed his forehead and stroked his cheek softly. "Be safe." He nodded. "You too." He said goodbye to them both and reluctantly left with the Dursleys. Anna sighed and leaned into her husband. "I hate goodbyes." Remus pulled her close. "Don't worry, love. We'll see him next year, when you and I start teaching." She grinned. "Can't wait." Remus kissed her nose. "The Marauders are going back to Hogwarts." Anna smirked. "They won't know what hit them."